Chapter 250. What hope did Remnant Dream have? On his right was Gu Fei with a sword, and on his left was the sword demon with a dagger. Behind him was the wall, and in front of him were his two friends, who had fallen to the ground just from being pushed off the wall. On top of the wall, there were more than 10 wretched people lying in ambush. At this time, all of them were pretending to be archers, knocking their bows and aiming at Remnant Dream. What was even more annoying was that some of them were even yawning. Shooting him is so boring. Remnant Dream stared at the cocky Tsubasa Sakuratsuka on top of the wall, indignant. What's the meaning of this? He didn't have any resentment towards Gu Fei. He just felt that people like Tsubasa Sakuratsuka had to be looked down on for being so wretched. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka grinned cheekily. Do you understand what a trap is now? Just leaving it on the ground for people to step on is the worst way to go. As a trap expert, you have to study your opponent's psychology and coax them to walk into your trap. That's the essence of a trap. Shameless. Remnant Dream cursed angrily when he heard Tsubasa Sakuratsuka boasting. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka continued to grin cheekily. Brother Zue, who is this guy? How did he offend you? Fireball asked. Oh, he's one of those guys who specializes in dropping equipment. Gu Fei introduced him to everyone. Oh. Everyone came to a realization. Their next guess was finally in line with the truth. Gu Fei or the sword demon had probably been dropped by this guy. Everyone was instantly enraged again. Where did you hide your equipment? Hand them all over and we'll spare your life. Tisk. Remnant Dream didn't care about his life at this point. Besides, he couldn't hand over the equipment even if they asked him to, so he acted like he didn't care. Just kill him. I'll go after him later to complete the mission, Gu Fei said. Why don't you wait at the resurrection point first? Sword Demon asked. Don't worry, I can easily catch up to him. The two of them discussed in front of Remnant Dream, completely ignoring him. Little can, fight it out with them. Two of Remnant Dream's friends who had died were now raging. The two of them had also been teased, and seeing Remnant Dream being ridiculed by so many onlookers, they finally couldn't take it anymore. Just as Gu Fei was about to make a move, he heard Remnant Dream hurriedly say, These two have nothing to do with us. They're just friends that I found to help out at the last minute. Come at me. Gu Fei was startled. He didn't know if Remnant Dream's words were true or false, but the two of them had already arrived in front of him. One of them charged towards the sword demon, while the other charged towards Gu Fei. Even if the two of them were innocent, Gu Fei and the sword demon couldn't just let the other party kill them. They immediately waved their weapons to defend themselves. The two of them weren't very skilled. Needless to say, Gu Fei was a great expert, and the sword demon was able to parry them with ease. He looked at Gu Fei and asked for his opinion. Don't worry about me. You guys go first. Remnant Dream shouted. If we die together. The two of them replied. Too melodramatic. Everyone thought to themselves. It was just that such a righteous melodramatic scene happened to the opponent, making it seem like they were unforgivable evil. Everyone's expression was a little unnatural. These days, the bad guys are all so loyal. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka sighed. In the end, he was looked down upon by his own brothers. Tisk, you're not a good guy. Yes, Yuzai is the most unloyal thing. Prioritizing hoes over friends. Forgetting friendship at the sight of profit. You're a bunch of fucking trash. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka retorted. In the end, they started to curse each other on the roof. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was alone and was obviously at a disadvantage. He was cursed by everyone. In a moment of anger, he jumped off the wall and pointed at Remnant Dream. Let me deal with this trash. Since he couldn't win against everyone, he placed the trash on Remnant Dream who had no resistance. Moreover, this guy saw that Remnant Dream was only wearing a shirt and pants. People without equipment were obviously easy to bully. As an archer, Tsubasa Sakaratsuka also wanted to fight in close combat. Look, this is called despicable. His brothers had already seen through his intentions and looked down on him. Gu Fei and the sword demon fended off Remnant Dream's two friends and didn't know what to do. Here came another troublemaker. Just as they were helpless, they suddenly heard Remnant Dream roar. I will never die in the hands of a bitch like you. After saying that, there was a sudden flash of white light and Remnant Dream disappeared just like that. The people who were cursing on the roof quieted down. The two pairs who were fighting below also stopped. Everyone looked at the place where Remnant Dream disappeared with a look of disbelief. Huh? Teleportation scroll? Gu Fei guessed as someone who had seen big scenes. No, the teleportation light isn't like that. In fact, the sword demon was someone who had seen all kinds of big scenes and had mastered them as knowledge. This. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka obviously had a lot of gaming experience. After a long while, he said, this seems to be the light of going offline. He forcefully went offline. Everyone was amazed. Wow, he's a man. There was a lot of discussion on the roof. It's mainly because Tsubasa is too despicable. He would rather risk the world's condemnation and forcefully go offline than die in his dirty hands. TSK. Tsubasa, this is all because of you. Now you should know how despicable you are. Find a place to end your own life. Without a despicable person like you, Cloud City will become a paradise. Amen. Someone put his hands together and saluted. Shut the fuck up. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka roared and then looked at Gu Fei and Sword Demon. There was a questioning look in his eyes. At the same time, there was a bit of awkwardness because Remnant Dream did shout this before he died. He would rather forcefully go offline than die in the hands of Tsubasa Sakaratsuka. Then let's just forget about it. The main character used this method to escape. Gu Fei and the others really had nothing to say. Remnant Dream's two dead friends were still in a daze. Suddenly, they exploded together again and pounced on Tsubasa Sakaratsuka. Tsubasa Sakaratsuka was obviously in a trance. He was completely unprepared. As an archer, being pounced on by two fully armed melee classes, what other outcome could there be other than death? The people who had been ridiculing Tsubasa Sakaratsuka all roared in unison at this time. Each of them drew their bows and shot arrows at the two. However, the fastest one was still Gu Fei. He teleported in front of Tsubasa Sakaratsuka and blocked the attack with his sword. Time was really too rushed. It was so rushed that Gu Fei didn't have time to use any tricks to resolve the opponent's attack. This defense was the first time in the game that he used his strength to resist an attack. Gu Fei already knew what would happen if he did this. In game terms, such an ordinary slash, because of the weakness in strength, Gu Fei's judgment was extremely weak. Moreover, the two of them were attacking at the same time. Gu Fei's sword couldn't stop the opponent's momentum. He could only retreat to resolve the attack. In the end, he crashed into Tsubasa Sakaratsuka who was behind him. Unfortunately, Tsubasa Sakaratsuka also didn't have much strength. This crash was very fierce and urgent, and he immediately tripped and fell backward. As he fell, he reflexively reached out to grab, and in the end, Gu Fei was also knocked to the ground. Gu Fei, who was on the ground, was still staring forward, ready to receive the next attack. However, he saw countless arrows fly down from the roof and focus on the two of them. There was also a flash of fire from the sky. The two instantly turned into white light and flew away. The final attack was only a few centimeters away from the two who had fallen to the ground. The players who fought in the game every day wouldn't feel any psychological burden from killing two innocent people. Moreover, in their eyes, it was justifiable defense. At this time, everyone was looking at the street below the roof with worried expressions. However, their mouths were still chattering. Tsubasa actually didn't react just now. He really lost his composure. Could it be that today's incident hurt his weak and cowardly heart? It's over. That guy forcefully logged off was a mental attack. Tsubasa was hit. Hurry up and find a girl to heal the wound in Tsubasa's heart. Oh my, speak of the devil, the rooftop instantly fell silent. Gu-Fei had just pulled Tsubasa Sakuratsuka up to ask if he was alright. Suddenly, he felt a strange atmosphere. Turning around, he saw that there was indeed a girl who had just turned around the corner of the wall and was staring at him in a daze. When Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, who was still in a daze, saw who it was, he immediately swept away his dejected state and said with great surprise, "It's you. Why are you here?" After saying that, he rushed forward. As expected of Tsubasa, his recovery ability is S rank. The crowd discussed. You might as well say that that girl is S rank healing medicine for Tsubasa. TSK, she appeared just in time. Is this the legendary fate? The crowd quietly looked at the street below the roof, hoping that something moving would happen. However, the girl's gaze passed through Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and fell on Gu-Fei. Why are you here? What are you doing? Ah! The crowd on the roof completely went crazy. What's going on? Does every woman in Cloud City know him? Who the hell is he? Fireball, tell us, who the hell is he? The crowd shouted. TSK, you otakus, how can you understand how deep my brother Zoe is? Fireball was extremely proud. Naturally, the people who came were vast and boundless. Gu-Fei looked at her, I'm here to do something. Why are you here? Hee, I told you that this is the closest way to the Archer camp's underground line. It seems that you still remember. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was proud. Vast Mang didn't say anything. She lowered her head and said, I'm leaving. After saying that, she crossed the street and continued in the direction of the Archer camp. Tsubasa, 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 Tsubasa. The crowd on the roof waved their bows and shouted. Of course. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka grinned, tidied up his equipment, and quickly chased after them. At this time, Sword Demon also quietly came to Gu-Fei's side and whispered, Are they all your friends? Gu-Fei looked up at the wretched men on the roof and was speechless. Chapter 251. Remnant Dream, who had forcefully logged out, still had a sliver of hope in his heart. Although the officials emphasized the possible losses that might occur when forcefully logging out, there were rumors that such losses were mainly caused by reloading. It was similar to forgetting to save when exiting a single-player game, so when the game was loaded again, it would naturally return to the previous state. At first glance, it sounded reasonable, but if it was really that simple, then it would be a huge loophole in the game. If Remnant Dream did not save after forcefully logging out, then wouldn't the equipment and level be returned to the original state after reading the data from the last time he logged out? If he transferred the equipment to someone else, forcefully logging out again, then going back online to load, wouldn't that be the way to duplicate the equipment? There were many people who could think of this, but so far, such an incident had never happened. So far in the parallel world, the occasional loopholes were due to unexpected problems caused by the first use of holographic simulation technology. Loopholes that could occur in normal games like this were extremely rare. Even so, this was the last sliver of hope in Remnant Dream's heart. After logging out for a long time, Remnant Dream logged back into the game with a nervous heart. Forcefully logging out was indeed not a simple reloading game like in SL. To put it simply, it was because the parallel world servers had to handle too many users. Unified planning and management was not only more effective, but it was also a must. The system would also save the data of these forcefully logged out users, but as the officials had said, there would be areas that were not well taken care of. What was not well taken care of was that your data would be incomplete. Incomplete meant that it was not a lot, nor was it wrong, it was just incomplete. Therefore, players would only lose items, experience, and everything that could be lost. It was impossible for them to have an extra piece of equipment out of nowhere. Perhaps their level of 30 would be mistakenly recorded as 40. Therefore, what Remnant Dream hoped for would never happen. When he re-entered the game after a while, his level and equipment were all the same as when he went offline. Reloading was just a small hope, so he was not too disappointed that it did not happen. However, his level did not drop again, which surprised Remnant Dream. Just as he thought, even if he was lucky enough not to cause any damage to the system by forcefully going offline, Gu Fei, Sword Demon, and the others were right next to him. If they killed him in passing, he would suffer at least 2 levels of damage. Remnant Dream was dead. This was the experience of previous games. For example, when someone forcefully went offline, disconnected, or lost power, the in-game character would stay in the game for a moment, waiting to be slaughtered. He didn't expect the parallel world to be so quick in this aspect. Forcefully logging out just like that, it really was a game that never got stuck if you said you wouldn't get stuck. Remnant Dream checked her level, experience, equipment, and skill mastery. She felt slightly relieved when she discovered that she hadn't lost anything. She put it back into her pocket when her expression suddenly changed. She took out her money pouch and flipped it open. Fuck you. In the end, the data loss still happened, and Remnant Dream's wallet lost a digit. He angrily kicked out, but with a "pa" sound, his foot was firmly caught again. Those bitches. Remnant Dream roared, they've already left, but they're still leaving traps. All of you can go to hell. Actually, this was really a misunderstanding. The trap skill of the parallel world was indeed only effective after it was activated. Before it was activated, the trap could stay in place. During this time, the trap owner could casually dismantle his own trap, but the others had to have the corresponding skills. If the trap owner set up a trap and no one stepped on it, then they had to go and dismantle it themselves. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a trap to use. Currently, everyone could only set up one trap. Remnant Dream's trap was only left behind due to the opponent's carelessness. Before he went online, White Yi Ruoyu was puzzled for a long time because he couldn't use the trap. His companions were just snickering at the side. At that time, each person set up a trap. Remnant Dream stepped on one, so naturally, there was one person who didn't have to dismantle it. Thus, his friends tricked White Yi Ruoyu into saying that it was him. Ambushers love to lie to each other like this. Their greatest joy was to see their companions throw a trap 8,000 meters away and not be able to dismantle it. Then, they would anxiously return to dismantle it. White Yi Ruoyu was the most amusing amongst them. If no one reminded him, he wouldn't be able to react for a long time. He was truly worthy of his nickname as a noob. At this time, it was almost reported to the GM as a bug. Remnant Dream suddenly went online and destroyed the trap. White Yi Ruoyu suddenly discovered that the trap was working again and naturally thanked him profusely. It was the complete opposite of Remnant Dream cursing the opponent's entire family. From his own wanted quest, Remnant Dream knew that Gu Fei had already gone offline. At this time, Remnant Dream wasn't fantasizing about getting back the long punishing Sai. Instead, he was thinking about how to avoid the opponent. Seeing that Gu Fei wasn't there, he immediately contacted his brothers in the studio and asked them to help him clear his PK points. At this time, Remnant Dream was naked. He was level 36 and didn't have much fighting ability. When the group of brothers saw his downtrodden appearance, they also sighed and comforted him. We'll find a chance to teach him a lesson. Everyone expressed their opinions. The people in the studio weren't normal. Compared to guilds, they were more united and disciplined. Compared to normal players, they were also more skilled. Professional players in the game were referring to people like them. Gu Fei's current performance was indeed very strong, but it wasn't enough to scare them. However, when the group of people went to the wanted quest office, they discovered that Remnant Dream had a wanted quest on him. It couldn't be changed. Remnant Dream was still in a daze and didn't think about it. At this time, he was thinking about how to end the long punishing Sai incident. Should he confess and ask for leniency? Remnant Dream was someone who wouldn't shed a tear until he saw the coffin. He held on to his last hope and didn't mention it for now. He ran to the jail to clear his PK points. In the end, he didn't see any news on the forums. Indeed, it was not Gu Fei's style to show off his equipment to his close friends. It was not Gu Fei's style to brag about it on the forums. Gu Fei's style was different. Just like when he helped Sword Demon snatch back Frostbite from Shi Xiaotian's hands, Gu Fei was thinking about whether or not he should find the owner of the item and return it. In Little Ray's bar, the experts who heard Gu Fei's intentions were very surprised. The spirit of not pocketing the money found had always been equivalent to the value of the item. A guy who righteously picked up 10 yuan and returned it, would he still have the same attitude when he picked up 1,000,000 yuan? It was the same in the game. He randomly picked up 2 belts, and if someone wanted to return it, then so be it. However, there were even people who would fall out with their friends after picking up such a superb item, let alone someone like Gu Fei, who had nothing to do with the other party at all. The main problem was that Gu Fei wasn't pocketing the money he picked up. In the eyes of the experts, this was something he got back from PK. It was obviously something he earned through hard work. Even Sword Demon, who had a good character, thought so. This was the value system of the online game. Gu Fei's thoughts were very outrageous in their eyes. Who knows who this belongs to? Should we ask Remnant Dream? Brother, you said. That's a good idea. Gu Fei nodded. Brother Yu was speechless. In the end, he said, what if Remnant Dream really killed this guy? Brother Yu thought that this question could make Gu Fei hesitate for a bit, but Gu Fei's thoughts were clearly more mature than Brother Yu thought. He didn't even think before replying, then of course I wouldn't take it. Everyone was speechless. Even though they felt that Gu Fei was too inflexible, from a human's point of view, they had to admit that his actions were very harmonious and correct. They didn't try to persuade him otherwise. Then go find Remnant Dream and ask her. Let's see if he'll tell you. Brother, you said. That's a bit difficult. His PK value has already been washed clean. If he could just randomly find someone, he would have been chased to the ends of the earth by now. Gu Fei said. When he had first dug up Remnant Dream's name, Brother Yu had already promoted it on the forums. At that time, everyone was filled with righteous indignation and said that they would hunt him down for the rest of their lives. The activities of Remnant Dream and the others had stagnated. It had to be said that this was one of the reasons, but in the end, no one was able to hunt him down. Even though the main city in the game wasn't as big as a city in real life, there were still hundreds of thousands of people. Trying to find a single player was extremely difficult. Just a name wasn't enough. There was no photo or address, so it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. As a result, the matter was left unsettled. Remnant Dream continued to live a comfortable life. When he first fought against Gu Fei, he was a level 40 player like everyone else. Let Brother Yu post something. When the owner sees it, they'll contact you. Yutian Shinming suggested. That way, there will definitely be a lot of owners. Han Family Young Master said. Let them talk about the equipment's stats. Apart from the owner, who can talk about it? Yutian Shinming said. The few of us, as well as Remnant Dream and the others, can all be considered youngsters who haven't seen much of the world yet. They're not good enough. Han Family Young Master mocked Yutian Shinming. Ugh, or are you saying that you want Qianli to do this, and then you'll find someone to act as the owner and get rid of him? Han Family Young Master asked. That's too despicable and shameless. Everyone exclaimed. That's what he said. I didn't think that way. Yutian Shinming pointed at Han Family Young Master. We know. Gu Fei rubbed Yutian Shinming's head. Only he could think of this method so quickly. May God bless this sinful guy so that he doesn't go to hell after he dies. Unscathed in battle pretentiously prayed for Han Family Young Master. Pfft, I'm just reminding him that it's very difficult to find the owner. It's better to just take it and exchange it for alcohol. Han Family Young Master said disdainfully. I'll think of a way myself. Gu Fei got up. Butterfly Knot, students who are thinking about how to deal with the lamenting students. Your hearts are not upright enough. Hurry up and repent with all your heart. Chapter 252. Gu Fei's own method was actually to find someone. By finding this person and then finding that person, this was the simplest and most effective way to find someone. Of course, the person Gu Fei was looking for was not Death Remnant Dream. With his current relationship with Death Remnant Dream, he believed that if he wanted to go east, Death Remnant Dream would point him west. He said that he wanted to find a so-and-so, and Death Remnant Dream would tell him that so-and-so's family had died during the Ice Age. The person Gu Fei was looking for was Shi Xiaotian. Shi Xiaotian had once said that she mingled in this group and engaged in shady business, and Gu Fei had never used her as a human resource. Thinking back, he actually knew a lot of people in the game, mainly people from all over the world. Thinking of the complicated expression on the sword demon's face when he saw the wretched guys in the flower garden today, Gu Fei was silent for a long time again. He was not a person who had many friends since he was a child. Since he was a child, he had mainly focused on practicing martial arts and had never gone to a proper school. In this kind of life circle, there were almost no opportunities to meet outsiders. When he grew up, he began to come into contact with some people in the martial arts circle. But martial arts were already declining, and even a martial arts family like the Gu family rarely practiced it, let alone others. This circle was already very small. It was difficult to meet someone, even more difficult to meet someone of the same age, and it was even more difficult to meet someone of the same age and get along. Even if they met, they were all far apart, separated after a face-to-face exchange of blows. It could be said that Gu Fei had lived alone for 25 years with martial arts as his companion. Even though he was teaching in school now, he had an ordinary colleague relationship with other teachers. For Gu Fei, no one had a real common language with him. Now that it was the game, everyone had a unified common topic, the game. In addition, it was clear that the leaders of the major guilds had taken the fight for hegemony as a common language with Gu Fei, and they all used their connections to pull him into their group. There were also those who treated women as a common language, idolized Gu Fei, and hoped to learn from him. There was also the group of experts from the child elite group who had dragged him along to look down on all living things. There were also the reincarnated amethyst girls who enjoyed gossiping and joining in the fun. Gu Fei was once the core of their gossip. These were all mixed together by accident. In addition to these, there were also people like the coward savior who could talk about martial arts with Gu Fei. Although his level was too low, he could only listen to what Gu Fei said. The two of them were like teacher and student, and there was no discussion between them. Other than that, there was Shi Xiaotian, a girl who had the same hobbies in real life as herself but was unable to display them. Although she was just using trickery, he was using kung fu, but why do these two words rhyme? Gu Fei was distracted. While he was meeting up with Shi Xiaotian, Gu Fei casually glanced at his friends list. The students were starting to come online one after another. When the last name lit up, student AFA, as the student representative, immediately began to summon Gu Fei. The other messy chatter also spread out. Bringing missions, leveling up, anything that could be brought. Money, equipment, scrolls, anything that could be given. Gu Fei could tell that these students had probably been harshly oppressed by their teachers. This was a chance to extort as much as they could. Yesterday, he gathered them together, lined them up, shouted their slogans, and marched forward. Even such an embarrassing situation could not make them back down. Are you done with your homework? Gu Fei replied indifferently. Teacher, today is the weekend. The students bared their fangs and brandished their claws. It was unknown whether they had some secret plan to use the weekend to extort Gu Fei. Gu Fei was unperturbed. He did not care much about these things in the game. After all, they were all his students. There was nothing wrong with letting them take advantage of the situation. But he had already given them all the equipment yesterday. He did not even have money. Bringing them to level up? There were more than 20 of them. There was no place for more than 20 people to level up together. As for bringing missions, there was no such thing as bringing missions. These things were mainly for running errands. If they encountered a battle that they could not win, they could ask for help. But what was the point of running errands? Oh, people like Yutian Shenming who had a terrible sense of direction needed to be brought along. As for the others who said they would bring missions, they must be those guys like Immortal Among Flowers. They were using this as an excuse to pick up girls and bring them around the world. But the students were very smart. It was not practical for more than 20 people to level up together. Therefore, they were evenly divided into 2 groups so that Gu Fei could take turns leading them. As for how much experience Gu Fei would sacrifice to bring them to level up, they did not care. They were brazenly using the excuse of extorting their teacher. How could this be considered extortion if the other party did not suffer any losses? The teacher would not punish them to run the field for this kind of thing. Indeed, Gu Fei did not care. It was just that he had something to do. He told the students that he would be there in a while and then went to do his own things. Next to the fountain in the center of Cloud City, Gu Fei saw Shi Xiaotian. This girl was always dressed in a weird way. Gu Fei already knew that she was an archer. But at this time, she was wearing a mage robe that dragged on the ground. Underneath the robe, there seemed to be a thief's cloak. Otherwise, there was no reason to explain how the hat on her head was. Only a thief's cloak would have such a hoodie style. Gu Fei waved at her as he walked in front of her. That's rare. You actually took the initiative to find me. What's the matter? Shi Xiaotian was very straightforward. It had only been a few days since Shi Xiaotian was killed, but Gu Fei had not asked about it. How's the matter from last time? That time was a misunderstanding. Gu Fei did not help, but it was on purpose. After thinking about it, he felt a little apologetic. It's nothing. This kind of thing happens all the time. I was stabbed by someone just now. Shi Xiaotian said as she took out a piece of bread from her pocket. She slowly chewed on it, probably to replenish the life that was lost after that stab. Gu Fei was not in the mood to get involved in Shi Xiaotian's career dispute, so he directly skipped the topic. Are you still in that place? The one that dropped people's equipment. Oh, them. Their business didn't do well, so we don't have much contact anymore. But we still have some contact. I heard that you made Xiaokan very miserable yesterday. Shi Xiaotian said. He asked for it, Gu Fei said indifferently. Why are you looking for me now? Do you want to get information and continue to chase after me? Shi Xiaotian said coldly. I won't say anything. I'm just trying to make a living. Why do you have to kill me? Trying to make a living? Gu Fei didn't understand. That's their job. They're from the studio. They drop people's equipment and the boss pays them. It's that simple, Shi Xiaotian said. Oh, then it's not easy to make a living. Gu Fei said. Especially when I met you, Shi Xiaotian said. I'm really unlucky. So it's better to find another way to make a living. Gu Fei said indifferently. Looks like you're looking for me for something else. Shi Xiaotian was also a smart person. From reading between the lines, he could tell that Gu Fei didn't have any intention of upholding justice and chasing after this group of people. It's like this. When Remnant Dream died yesterday, he dropped this equipment. It's very high quality. I don't know where he dropped it from, Gu Fei said. Oh, you want to find out who the owner is and return it? Gu Fei nodded. You're really too noble. Standing here, I feel like I'm a microbe. Shi Xiaotian's words contained ridicule, but his face was expressionless. Gu Fei couldn't figure out what he was thinking. What is it? What is it? Shi Xiaotian asked. There were 2 daggers. Gu Fei casually took one and handed it over. Shi Xiaotian took it and looked at it. Now that the dagger is in my hand, aren't you afraid that I'll run? No. Gu Fei's other hand held the sword. It's useless to kill me. The item is still on me, Shi Xiaotian said. Then run. Gu Fei said. Shi Xiaotian didn't move and handed the dagger back. I've never seen this equipment before. Oh. Gu Fei was puzzled. But he also knew that there was no need for Shi Xiaotian to hide anything. If I'm not wrong, I'm afraid only Little can explain the origin of this equipment. Shi Xiaotian said. What do you mean? Gu Fei asked. I'm confident that I know all the equipment they got, but I've never seen this set of green letters. Someone must have hidden it. Since you said that Remnant Dream died, then he must have hidden it. Shi Xiaotian said. So he's the only one who knows who dropped it. Yes. Also, it's very likely that this item was dropped by someone else. They're a professional robber group. They must have targeted someone with a high-quality item and then purposely dropped it. Under these circumstances, how could such an unknown equipment be hidden? Shi Xiaotian said. Maybe they didn't know at first, but it fell out when they died. Gu Fei said. This kind of high-quality equipment, why wouldn't they use it? If they couldn't use it, they would either auction it or store it safely in the warehouse. Why would they keep it in their pockets? Shi Xiaotian said. That makes sense. Then what do you mean? Maybe they were fighting a boss, or during a mission, they accidentally dropped it and Little can hid it. I don't think I need to explain his motive. Understood. Gu Fei nodded. So, if you want to talk about the owner of this item, it can only be Little Can. Do as you see fit. Shi Xiaotian said. Then I'm the owner now. TSK. Gu Fei looked at the dagger in his hand. You got lucky. Then I'm leaving. See you tomorrow. Shi Xiaotian said. Tomorrow? Gu Fei was puzzled. Isn't tomorrow the mercenary group finals? Oh. You're in the Black Hand mercenary group. Gu Fei was surprised. You have to be careful. I'm very despicable. Shi Xiaotian stretched out his hand and made a shooting gesture to Gu Fei, then turned and walked away. Despicable. Gu Fei was silent. Butterfly not, the whole world is talking about the outbreak. I'm surrounded by the outbreak. Where will the butterfly go? Is this a suspense? Chapter 253. After Shi Xiaotian left, Gu Fei ignored the urging of the students and slowly went to complete a few more wanted missions. The quest that he received from Remnant Dream's death ended up failing because Remnant Dream's PK points had already been erased. Gu Fei's progression was interrupted once again. Who knew how long it would take for him to complete the quest 200 times in a row? Gu Fei, who was on his way to the wanted mission office, was blocked by someone on the street. Due to the increasing number of players in the game, all kinds of trends were spreading like mushrooms after a spring rain. The act of blocking Gu Fei was a new entertainment item. Everyone knew that it was easy to drop equipment after death with PK points. Therefore, after receiving a PK mission, some people did not come to complete it. Instead, they invited 3 to 5 friends to find the person and kill them. It was extremely sinister. It was Gu Fei's first time encountering this item. Although he often did wanted missions, it had been a while since he had PK points. Today's PK points were just in time for a small group that liked to come out on weekends for entertainment. More than a dozen PK points. This was going to explode all over the place. After receiving the mission, the few of them came to him excitedly. As soon as they saw Gu Fei, they used appraisal. They did not appraise the clothes. Gu Fei put the sword in his pocket, but the shoes made them drool. After sizing up the goods, the few of them nodded in satisfaction. They glared at Gu Fei and shouted, "Stop! Wanted mission!" They learned this style from Gu Fei. He was outstanding in the PK ranking and wanted mission world in Cloud City. Gu Fei was startled. He didn't know the purpose of this group of people, and he really thought that they were pure and kind people. Gu Fei did not want to make things difficult for these guys who had the same hobby as him. He did not fight them and turned to run. "Hurry!" the group shouted. Then, they saw Gu Fei gradually disappear from their sight. "Damn, that's too fast. Those shoes are too awesome, someone exclaimed. Motherfucker, I already said that we could have just chopped them down. Why are you always making a fuss? What's the point of doing that? Someone was dissatisfied. Keep going. There's no way he can clear his PK record so quickly. The few of them continued chasing after Gu Fei. Gu Fei ran into a few people from time to time while doing his wanted tasks. Gu Fei's movement speed was too fast. When the others arrived at his coordinates and chased after him, all they could see was his back. There were even more pitiful times when they finally caught up to Gu Fei and saw that he had just finished off his target. Just as they were about to attack excitedly, Gu Fei smiled at them and disappeared. What's going on? What's going on? The few of them scratched their heads and continued to chase after the coordinates. In the end, after Gu Fei had washed himself clean of PK, the few of them were out of breath from running. They couldn't even get within 30 meters of Gu Fei. Gu Fei, who had no more PK points, came to them cheerfully and recited a poem with a smile. We were born of the same root. Why rush to torture each other? Gu Fei meant that everyone was doing a PK mission, so there was no need to get entangled with each other. When the few of them heard this, they immediately came to a realization. Fuck, so it's also a robbery. No wonder his PK points are so high. Since they were in the same line of work, forget it. The few of them thought this way and smiled at Gu Fei. Let's work together if there's a chance. This was just a formality. For them, this activity was directly related to the distribution of benefits, so it was done by a few close friends. They didn't want to add an irrelevant person to compete with them for food. Gu Fei thought that he alone was enough for this mission. Cooperation? There was really no need for that. But since the other party had invited him, he had to respond politely. So he just nodded perfunctorily. At first glance, the two sides seemed to have a tacit understanding. The group of people couldn't help but think, as expected, he knows this well. The moment he heard about cooperation, he came up to make us sworn brothers. That's a guy with no inner qualities. After that, the two sides tacitly went their own ways. On Gu Fei's side, the messages in his friend list were about to explode. They were all from students urging him to come. Ignoring messages was a skill that Gu Fei had learned when he was reincarnated into Amethyst. He wasn't afraid no matter how many messages came. At this time, he calmly looked through them one by one and randomly picked one to reply. I'm coming. Outside of Cloud City, the students were divided into two teams, training painfully. Cloud Suburb Farm used to be the most hellish training area around Cloud City. Now that there were more players, the situation naturally didn't change. Fortunately, there were high and low levels among the students of Ultimate Class 3. For example, AFA's level was enough to bully the people training in Cloud Suburb Farm. So, they quickly fought for two training areas using Cloud City's 1v1 rules. But the problem now was that things weren't the same as before. The experienced players in the game would find a powerful boss to back them up. Just like how the students of Ultimate Class 3 relied on AFA, who was obviously one level higher, to come to Cloud Suburb Farm to bully others for territory. Soon, the bullied guy would summon his boss, who was level 40, to come back and bully AFA. The process didn't need to be described. Just like how AFA bullied a guy over level 20, the other party made AFA surrender in no time. The training area was naturally snatched back, and the students of Ultimate Class 3 naturally had to go to other places to fight for more. In the end, after AFA was done bullying others, there would always be someone stronger coming to bully AFA. When Gu Fei arrived, AFA had just been stabbed half to death by a level 40 thief. A group of people sat on the embankment by the roadside, sighing, strongly condemning AFA as a good-for-nothing. Gu Fei's appearance made the students feel as if they had seen the light at the end of the tunnel. They cried and screamed as they surrounded Gu Fei and complained. Gu Fei nodded in understanding and waved his hand. Line up, let's go somewhere else. the students' thoughts were more simple. They only felt that it was cool and refreshing to be bullied back after being bullied. Changing to another place to escape was too unmanly. But in the face of Gu Fei's threat of running 8 laps, they didn't voice any opinions even though they were unwilling. The students silently lined up, their morale was relatively low. Originally, they thought that Gu Fei would come and help them vent their frustrations. Who would have thought that he would run away with his tail between his legs? This was really adding another stroke to their frustrations. The students lined up, and under the personal guidance of Gu Fei, they followed behind him listlessly. At this time, the road was getting further and further away. Fa, who had some gaming knowledge, was staring with wide eyes. He could finally see that this leveling area was getting higher and higher. Both Cloud Valley and Cloud Valley had monsters that were level 40. Gu Fei didn't dare to lead them any further. After all, the students' levels were far lower than Amethyst's. They wouldn't be of much use in the level 50 leveling area. Although Gu Fei could handle it alone, the efficiency would be too low. Right now, they were leveling, not playing. Efficiency had to be taken into consideration, and Gu Fei was more considerate. The level 40 leveling area was also more crowded. Gu Fei led the team into the valley and randomly found a piece of land. He went up to negotiate with someone, dueled, and easily won the territory. If they fought for 2 pieces of land, it would still be slightly crowded with more than 20 students, but no matter how much land there was, Gu Fei wouldn't be able to handle it alone. After that, he arranged for the lower-level students to sit at the side. The higher-level students would attract the monsters, and the capable ones would also help fight. After that, it was Gu Fei's shocking performance of killing monsters in seconds. Not only were the students in admiration, but the surrounding players were also shocked. For a moment, the students felt extremely proud. Although the levels of the students were all over the place and the distribution of experience was also messy, the efficiency of the experience was still gratifying. Especially for the lower-level students, their needs and rewards were completely out of proportion. Their experience was increasing at an insane rate. The students cheered and were pleasantly surprised. Just as they were in high spirits, Gu Fei suddenly stopped and ordered the students, "Line up." "What's going on?" The students were puzzled. "It's past 9, you should go offline," Gu Fei said. Ah. The students shouted. "Teacher, today is the weekend, play more." In fact, many students came with the desire to play all night. "It's the weekend," Gu Fei murmured. "Then let's play until 9:30. Ah. Some students looked at the time and continued to shout. "It's already 9:27. "Yes, that's why I'm giving you preferential treatment because it's the weekend. At 9:30, it'll take a lot of time to go back to the city and go offline. I'll give you some free time, disappear at 10 o'clock. Gu Fei said. Ah. The students shouted in vain, but they didn't dare to object. Did you dare? If you dared, try running 8 laps in the next PE class. The students of the Ultimate Class 3 suddenly realized something. The teacher should be someone that the students couldn't hide from. They shouldn't take the initiative to get in front of the teacher. Even if they were playing the game, the teacher was still the teacher, and the students were still the students. The essence couldn't be changed. It was possible for both sides to abandon their identities in the game and not know each other, like Gu Fei and Yutian Shinming. But the students of the Ultimate Class 3 and Gu Fei had a real teacher-student relationship. This wasn't something that could be changed by playing a game. Even if there were teachers who would put down their airs because of this, the Ultimate Class 3 knew that it wasn't likely to happen to teacher Gu Fei. Although he was just a PE teacher, Gu Fei was relatively serious. Physical education was a subject that wasn't very important, so the results were always relatively casual. If you didn't reach the standard, the teacher would help you improve it to the standard. Only Gu Fei did things according to the rules and was meticulous. Everyone took the initiative to get close to such a teacher. They were really blinded by lard. But the problem was that they were already close, so they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Speaking of which, Teacher Gu treated everyone well, except for the limited time they had to play. After the group vented in the guild channel, they asked Gu Fei pitifully, "Teacher, are we still coming here to level up tomorrow?" "Tomorrow, I might not be able to tomorrow. I have to go to the finals of the mercenary competition tomorrow." Gu Fei looked into the distance. "Butterfly knot, the finals are finally coming." Chapter 254. It was Saturday, and the finals were coming. Everyone was making the best use of their time to enrich themselves. Those who were just a little bit away from leveling up were making the best use of their time. Those who were just a little bit away from leveling up were making the best use of their time. The simplest and most direct way was to obtain a godly weapon before the competition. This would undoubtedly increase their strength by leaps and bounds. There was such a piece of equipment in the child elite group. Without a doubt, it was a piece of equipment that was above its level. Furthermore, it was a green word set. Gu Fei had claimed that he was going to return it to the owner, but after going around in circles, he said that the owner of the dagger was Remnant Dream, so it belonged to him now. The experts did not say anything. Because Gu Fei had a bad record of being two-faced in the child elite group, they did not see him as an upright and promising young man. Now that he had done this, beast in human clothing. Sanctimonious. Everyone was chewing over these words in their hearts. Of course, no one would spit it out. Gu Fei's sword was on the table. It was very handy. This long execution and short sai doesn't seem to be of any use to me. Gu Fei sighed. He had been fiddling with this thing for some time. Look. Gu Fei stretched out his right hand, holding the long execution. Even the green light isn't very bright. This means that I haven't even met the requirement for my coefficient. Gu Fei was experienced in this aspect. His night streamer was the same. Although they were both purple pieces of equipment, the color of the physical attack attribute was on a completely different level from the magic attack attribute. One look and one would think that the magic attack was more dazzling. This was a hint from the system, using the brightness of the color to vaguely remind the player that their coefficient was not enough. The situation with the long execution was more serious. Not only was its attack color dim, but even its additional attributes were not completely green. It was obvious that it was not fully activated. As he spoke, Gu Fei stretched out his left hand, holding the short sai. This is even better. Apart from the word short sai, the rest are all dark. Is it because I don't have any dual-wielding skills that I can't use it? The experts looked from his left hand to his right hand, then back to his left hand. In the end, they scolded in unison, "What are you looking at? If you can't appraise it, put it on the table." His appraisal skill could not keep up with the demand for high-grade equipment. If you wanted to see its attributes, you either had to obtain it yourself, or the owner would set up a stall to publicize its attributes. Everyone asked Gu Fei to place it on the table, meaning to announce it in the manner of a stall. Gu Fei was even bolder. He directly threw the two daggers on the table and gestured for everyone to take a look. The experts picked it up one by one and tried to play with it. They even compared it with each other. Hey, look at mine. It's pretty green, right? It's not as green as mine. Watch me take it. Mine is the greenest. Gu Fei resisted the urge to explode. Didn't you just say that you couldn't identify it in your hands? Now tell me, why are they comparing it to green now? Sword Demon's personality was not as proactive as the others. Finally, the two daggers were passed to him. He picked one up and looked at it. He nodded. Very green. He picked up another one and looked at it again. It's also very green. Then, he picked up two, looked at his left hand and nodded. This hand is not green. Looks like it needs both hands. Unscathed in battle was proud. After snatching it from Sword Demon's hand, he said proudly, I can make both of them green. Is it green enough? Gu Fei finally couldn't take it anymore and was ready to flip the table. No, It's not enough. Unscathed in Battle still shook his head. I'm sure it's not as green as Sword Demons. The passive skill that warriors had at level 12 was called Weapon Mastery. It had a very wide range. All swords, axes, and spears were added, but daggers, bows, and arrows were not. Therefore, in terms of the coefficient of daggers, Sword Demon was definitely the best. I don't know if it's fully activated. Sword Demon shook his head. It was the first time that the experts had seen green equipment. No one knew how green it would be when the coefficient was fully reached. In the end, he turned to look at Unscathed in Battle. Have you activated your dark attribute? Unscathed in Battle was dejected. No. Looks like it needs to reach the coefficient completely, Sword Demon concluded. Let's not talk about reaching the coefficient first. That requires both hands. Other than Berserker, who else has two-handed skills? Yutian Shinming reminded everyone. Sword Demon was silent for a while before saying, thieves can also have it if they change their profession to assassin, but they need a skill scroll to learn it. Gu Fei asked, can sorcerers do it? This shouldn't be possible, right? Everyone looked at each other. Gu Fei's question sounded like an idiot's question, but no one dared to pat their chest and make a guarantee. Because this question was so stupid that no one had ever studied it before. It lacked practical basis. I don't think so. Gu Fei still knew some of the rules of the game. He sighed and waved his hand. Then Sword Demon will take it. Based on their understanding of Gu Fei, they had already expected that if he couldn't use the dagger himself, it would definitely benefit Sword Demon in the end. Their eyes were so red that they were about to bleed. Imperial Sky Divine Ming sighed with emotion, when will you be able to get a bow back? He had just changed his bow as well, and was still admiring it a few days ago. However, this person was afraid of comparison. Good and bad were relative. Compared to Long Zhu and Short Sai, even if they were stripped of their entire bodies, they would still be inferior. Sword Demon's expression was a bit awkward. He wasn't a hypocritical person. He really wanted this Sword Demon, so he didn't have any intention of declining. But it didn't seem good to just accept it. It seemed a bit difficult to ask for money. At the end of the day, his relationship with Gu Fei was at a point where they were neither close nor close. It made it difficult for Sword Demon to make a decision. On the other hand, Yutian Shinming didn't know whether it was intentional or not. He looked at Sword Demon and muttered, if this thing is sold, it should be worth at least 2,000 gold coins, right? 2,000 gold coins? Yutian, you're too conservative. Brother, you said with a look of an expert. This dagger is obviously of a higher level. You can't use the current market to evaluate it. If it's sold separately, I'm afraid Sword Demon's damage is more advantageous now. It can be sold for more than 1,000. Sword Demon's damage isn't so outstanding, but it's still at the level of a first-class dagger. It can be sold for around 800. Now that the two are together, it's attached with fatality and skills. The price of a skill weapon has always doubled, so it can be sold for at least 3,000. The two had already discussed the price. How could Sword Demon turn a deaf ear to them? He immediately said to Gu Fei, then I'll buy it for 3,000. But I don't have money right now. I have to owe it first. Gu Fei smiled and said, we're so familiar with each other. Why are you so serious? Just give me 800 or 1,000 as a gesture. 800 or 1,000 is considered a gesture. You're really arrogant. Why don't you say it's for free? Yutian Shinming shouted. He felt that when Sword Demon said he wanted to pay, Gu Fei declined. This matter was settled with a sense of brotherhood and everyone was happy. How could he really ask for it? What does a kid know? Go play at the side. Gu Fei waved his hand. Sword Demon was very pleased with this. Then let's make it cheaper. Just give me 2,000 gold. I said 800 or 1,000, so it's 1,800 gold. Gu Fei said. Sword Demon knew that the 800 or 1,000 that Gu Fei said was not an imaginary number, but a real number. It was really hypocritical to push and shove for 200 gold. Sword Demon immediately nodded without hesitation. In the end, he said, I don't have 1800. I have to owe it first. No hurry. Gu Fei said plainly. The person involved had no objections, but Yutian Shinming seemed to be unable to stand it. He put his hand into his pocket and threw a scroll on the table. He slapped the table and looked at Gu Fei. Lightning Element Scroll, I'll sell it to you for 1800 gold. How about? Okay. Gu Fei happily picked it up from the table. He pulled the scroll and said, I also don't have money, but I still owe it. One hand for the money. Yutian Shinming hadn't even finished speaking when he saw a lightning-like light fly between Gu Fei's fingers and disappear in an instant. The scroll was already wrinkled like a piece of toilet paper. Gu Fei rubbed it casually and it immediately crumbled. How could the experienced and knowledgeable experts not know that the scroll had already been used? They were all dumbfounded and admired Gu Fei's straightforwardness. Yutian Shinming was like a fool. The words he wanted to say just now were stuck in his throat. He then muttered, It's already been used. The end of his voice was raised, showing his disbelief. It's been used. I'll return it to you when I have money. Gu Fei said. Ayya. Yutian Shinming was about to pounce over when Gu Fei hurriedly said, See you at the teleportation formation. He flashed out of the private room. Yutian Shinming didn't give up and chased after him. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than Gu Fei's teleportation. When he rushed out of the tavern, there were many forks in the streets. He didn't know where Gu Fei had gone. Imperial Sky Shinming angrily returned to the private room, only to see Sword Ghost playing with the long slash and short side daggers with a look of longing on his face. He was probably fantasizing about the beautiful scene of both daggers being activated. Sword Demon, you don't have to pay. Just think of it as me exchanging the scroll for you. Yutian Shinming walked into the private room and patted Sword Demon's shoulder generously. The Sword Ghost just smiled and said, That's not it. How can it be? Qianli is too ungrateful. Yutian Shinming sat on the side gloomily with an expression of, I've misjudged you. He's thinking for me. He doesn't want me to owe him anymore. Sword Demon said lightly. Huh? Yutian Shinming didn't understand for a moment. It's easy to return money, but it's hard to return a favor. Sword Demon sighed. It varies from person to person. Brother, you said, Qianli's style of doing things varies from person to person. He knows Sword Demon's style of doing things, so he did it this way. As for Yutian. Yutian, I think it's better if you just forget about your scroll. Chapter 255. Yutian Shinming listened to their explanations for Gu Fei and felt relieved. As for his scroll, since he didn't have any complaints about Gu Fei, he didn't really care about the money. Brother Yu was right. Gu Fei's individualized strategy was very successful. Gu Fei, who had run away from the tavern, was also looking at the skill's introduction, Electric Wall. Manipulates powerful lightning magic to create an electric barrier that blocks everything. Lasts for 20 seconds. Block everything. The system's explanation had always been full of boasting. The fireball spell was said to drive the magical power of fire to burn everything. Gu Fei didn't pay much attention to it. He pointed and chanted, Electric Wall, descend. Lightning spells were indeed lightning spells. Gu Fei's descent of the heavenly fire will was definitely not as fast as this. As soon as he finished chanting, the air in the direction of his fingers suddenly convulsed. The players passing by were also shocked by this strange change. Then, there was a series of crackling sounds, and a twisted net made of fine electric currents appeared in front of him. From time to time, there would be sparks flashing, and the net was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. In terms of visual impact, lightning was much stronger than fire and water. It was too dazzling. This electric wall was more than 3 meters wide, but it didn't block the street in front of them. But the players passing by stopped and looked curiously at this skill that they had never seen before. Some of the more daring ones even went closer and touched it with their fingers. With a bang, sparks flew between his fingers and the electric wall. The player let out a strange cry and retracted his finger. He looked at his status and shouted, "Damn, numb." Amidst everyone's amazement, after 20 seconds, the skill disappeared. Only then did everyone realize that they hadn't noticed who had used the skill. When they looked around, Gu Fei had already left. "So draining," Gu Fei exclaimed. Just now, the electric wall had drained half of his magic. And he was very familiar with the feeling of holding back. It was the same as when he used teleportation. In other words, players could increase their mana consumption to increase the effect of skills. Take instant movement for example. The amount of mana consumed would affect the distance traveled. As for Fireball and Heaven's descending flame wheel, they didn't increase the amount of mana consumed to increase the damage, nor did lightning. It seemed that this was just a special characteristic of some special spells. Gu Fei pondered the characteristics of this spell and thought about how it could be combined with Kung Fu. At the same time, he headed towards the teleportation portal in the direction of the mercenary building. 7:00 arrived in the blink of an eye, and everyone who participated in the mercenary confrontation had already arrived at the teleportation array. Today was not only the final between Child Elite Group and Black Hand Mercenary Group. Against the Currents Waterflower Mercenary Group would also compete with Rainbow Cloud for third place. In fact, the battle for third place was even more intense than the finals between Child Elite Group and Black Hand Mercenary Group. This was because the system stipulated that only the top 3 would receive a special reward. In other words, no matter who won or lost between Child Elite Group and Black Hand Mercenary Group, they would not be able to escape this reward. It was just a difference in level. On the other hand, between Waterflower Mercenary Group and Rainbow Cloud Mercenary Group, the loser would not get anything. When the Han family young master and the others arrived, they met against the Currents group. Everyone maintained their usual harmony, working hard, fighting hard, and cheering each other on. After saying their goodbyes, they were teleported to the pre-battle map. Before the battle, it was usually the other party's intelligence report. However, Black Hand Mercenary Group was really low-key, which made Brother Yu feel a little awkward. Without intelligence, he had become unprecedentedly low-key in this mercenary group. This Black Hand Mercenary Group has a total of 100 people, and their levels are all quite high. To say that they are not as good as the 4C's Mercenary Group would be underestimating them. After becoming the number 1 mercenary group in the system, they have now begun to expand some player missions. As far as I know, they are very professional in terms of missions, have a fair price, and have a good reputation. What Brother Yu said couldn't be considered intelligence, but the problem was that it had limited value in terms of actual combat. The intelligence that was needed in actual combat was the exact distribution of the other party's professions, the status of their experts, and their usual fighting style. It would be best if they had some understanding of the personalities of some key people. The Han family young master's tactics seemed to be improvised, but in reality, they were all arranged according to the intelligence he had gathered. Take the battle against the Water Flower Mercenary Group as an example. It was an opponent of nearly 80 people, but that battle could be said to have been won without any suspense. Everything was under control, and that was because the Han family young master was very familiar with that group. However, Brother Yu is indeed worthy of being called the king of intelligence. From the limited intelligence he had, he was able to analyze some things. From the way they handle things, this mercenary group is undoubtedly very cohesive. It is very likely that they will explode with explosive power that we have never seen before, so we should be cautious. This is the finals, so let's all fight seriously. Brother Yu said. Brother Yu, what are you saying? Yutian Shinming said unhappily, we have always given our all. Do you think this is a shonen manga? Only when we are beaten half to death will we shout, I'll show you my true strength. We have already tried our best. Yes, that's the spirit. Continue to work hard. Since the intelligence is not enough. The Han family young master who had been silent finally spoke, then let's start gathering information after the battle starts. Qianli, Yutian, Sword Demon, your speed advantage should be absolutely obvious. When the battle starts, the three of you should approach them first and see if there is anything you can use. The three of them nodded. The three of us will first strategize in the back. Han family young master said. Don't drag me into this, I am just a bodyguard. Unscathed in battle said angrily. Refresh all agility warriors. Yutian Shenming said to him sympathetically. Get lost. While they were laughing and scolding, the countdown started. Brother, you quickly noticed a phenomenon. Not all of them are here. 87 people. They are missing 13. Oh, that's normal. This is just a game. Everyone expressed their understanding. If it was really a big event, people who understood the situation would put the game aside. The final match officially began. According to the official announcement, the map for the final match was specially made, but in reality, what could be done with this map? The scenery had indeed changed a lot, but no one was here to enjoy the scenery. In the eyes of the young master of the Han family, that beautiful and majestic peak was a good place to have a bird's-eye view of the entire map. The river that seemed to have dried up after being washed by the river was a good route for him to advance secretly. There were also the twin trees that looked like twins. The two trees were separated by more than 60 coordinates. What the hell was the point of making them the same? The Han family young master roughly studied the terrain in front of him and pointed at the mountain. Go there. Taking the high ground again. Everyone was bored. It was like this every time. They were numb. No, it's there. The Han family young master pointed and walked away. They didn't see where he was pointing, but their intuition told them that it was the direction of the mountain. The 6 of them advanced at full speed. They didn't find any enemies along the way and finally arrived at the place that the Han family young master pointed at. The majestic mountain was in front of them. The 6 of them were only tens of meters away from the bottom of the mountain. The Han family young master looked around and pointed at a small forest at the bottom of the mountain. Over there. The 5 of them followed him into the forest. They still couldn't figure out what he was planning. Didn't you want us to gather information? Gu Fei couldn't hold back anymore. He wanted to gather information. If it was convenient, he could kill a few of them. That would be great. No hurry, the information will come to us. Keep an eye on it. The Han family young master said. Keep an eye on what? This map is obviously about taking the high ground. That's why there's such a perfect mountain like mine. If it's a fight between 2 groups with similar strength, this high ground will be the key to victory. They will definitely come here. The Han family young master said. Similar strength? Do we count? Brother, you wasn't confident. The Han family young master smiled. Of course not. But because we have the big kiting strategy. To deal with this strategy, it's necessary to take the high ground. They will definitely come. I didn't expect your big kiting strategy to have so many foreshadowing. Brother, you sighed. Then let's wait and see. Then let's peep from here. Let's disguise ourselves. Waiting had always been boring. Imperial Sky Shenming casually plucked some twigs and leaves, weaving a straw hat. He admired it for a moment, feeling that it was not bad. He placed it on his head and asked the others, do you guys want one? No one paid attention to him. The 5 of them were completely immersed in their own world. Sword Demon had 3 daggers. 2 of them were long slash and the other one was Frostbite's memory. He was probably thinking about how to use them when the battle started. The Han family young master looked out of the forest from time to time. He took out a bottle of wine from his pocket and drank it slowly. Brother Yu's expression was the most focused. His eyes stared at the forest without blinking. His left hand held a small notebook, and his right hand that held a pen contained infinite explosive power. No one would doubt that when the information appeared, his hand could explode with an agility of 1,000 points. As for unscathed in battle, it wasn't easy to hide in the forest due to his large size. He tried his best to lower his body and squatted behind a big tree. He would occasionally tilt his head and look out. He looked like someone hiding in a corner to take a dump. The last one was Gu Fei. He was dressed in a black robe. It was not easy to spot him in the dark forest. He propped his sword with both hands. His eyes were cold and his face was expressionless. It could be summed up in one word: murderous. Everyone is so serious. Imperial Sky Divine Ming could not help but be infected by the heavy atmosphere. He adjusted the straw hat on his head, opened his eagle eyes wide, and stared straight out. He's here. The first to discover the target was not Imperial Sky Shinming, who had the eagle eyes, but the Han family's young master. He waved his hand and pointed. Everyone had to turn their heads. Everyone was looking in the wrong direction. Outside the forest, the Black Hand mercenaries quietly passed through the gap between the two mountains and came to the foot of the peak. Is everyone here? Han family young master asked Yutian Shinming. I'll count. Yutian Shinming began to rub his eyes. Even with the eagle eyes, this was not an easy job. Butterfly Knot, everyone, please wait in the forest with the elites. You can choose your hiding method. You can stand like Gu Fei, or you can squat behind a tree like Uncle Wu Shang. Bring your own toilet paper. Chapter 256. Although Yutian Shinming had the eyesight of an eagle, it was still difficult for him to count the squirming crowd at the foot of the mountain. To count the moving targets, he needed a certain sense of direction. If Yutian Shinming had a sense of direction, he wouldn't have a poor sense of direction. He stared back and forth, and didn't know how many times he had to count. The group of people had already circled the foot of the mountain, but Yutian Shinming still couldn't get a result. Unscathed in battle was getting impatient, and asked, You still haven't finished counting? Yutian Shinming looked like he had just been pardoned, and coldly glared at Unscathed in battle and roared, Stop yelling, hurry up and finish counting. You've forgotten where you've been with all this noise. This reminded Han family young master that this little commander was a rare oversight. He immediately patted Yutian Shinming and said, All right, don't force yourself. The squirming Black Hand mercenary group stopped at the foot of the mountain. After finding the path, they began to climb the mountain. Wow, is this necessary? Everyone is going up the mountain. Yutian Shinming exclaimed. This mountain is closer to our spawn point, and we have fewer people, so we're more mobile. If we wanted to take the high ground, we would already be at the top of the mountain, and would be surrounded by them. Han family young master said. Oh. Everyone listened, and looked at the movement of the Black Hand mercenary group. Sure enough, they weren't climbing freely, but were advancing in a formation, as if they were ready to receive an attack from the top of the mountain. Our forces won't split up. This is the first habit our opponents have developed during the mercenary competition. Han family young master laughed coldly. The Black Hand mercenary group were halfway up the mountain, and after a few more steps, the archers at the front of the formation suddenly started shooting. What are they doing? Yutian Shinming was shocked. The Han family young master smiled faintly again. This is the second habit they've developed. They're wary of the instant kill ability of us sorcerers in the formation. So, you see, when a team was advancing, the warrior should be the meat shield at the outermost edge of the team, protecting vulnerable ranged classes such as archers or mages. If they were ambushed, they would immediately die. But now, we felt that our mages could instantly kill everything in our formation, and that our warriors wouldn't be able to protect us either. So, we decided to send our archers to the outermost perimeter and rely on our advantage of distance to take the initiative. That place wasn't within the range of a mage's spell, right? They shot first and didn't give you a chance to show yourself. Han family young master said and turned to look at Gu Fei. Gu Fei was silent for a moment before saying, "Actually, my area of effect spells might not be able to insta-kill a warrior right now. Using a warrior to attract the firepower is more correct. You're a freak. Your dual flame flash is the most powerful, while your other spells are weaker." Yutian Shinming looked down on him. If he was a mage and saw Gu Fei like this, he would inevitably think, if dual flame flash is so powerful, then your other spells must be even more powerful. Gu Fei shrugged his shoulders. Dual flame flash has a physical attack, and it's more practical. Yutian Shinming spat out a mouthful of blood. In the eyes of all mages, dual flame flash was the most useful skill when used by Gu Fei. Moreover, it was a physical attack. Damn it, if it wasn't for the dark flowing light sword that dealt both physical and magic damage, what kind of physical attack would there be? Han family young master laughed. I just hope that they will have this kind of exaggerated thought process. The Black Hand mercenary group had already successfully occupied the top of the mountain under the continuous attacks of the archers. A large group of people had been so careful and put in so much effort. They had even used the same energy as when they attacked the Wolf Ivory Mountain's 5 warriors. In the end, they discovered that the top of the mountain was empty and couldn't help but feel disappointed. If they knew that their actions had been judged as a joke by the 6 people in the small forest not far from the foot of the mountain, then they would have spat out even more blood. After the Black Hand mercenary group settled down at the top of the mountain, they began to look around. It's going to be hard for them next. Han family young master said, "We can't give up the view of the mountain, but they will have to send people to find us. This way, it's inevitable that they will split into 2 groups. Whichever group has fewer people will be an opportunity for us to take advantage of. In this way, splitting into 2 groups seems to be the most effective and safe plan." As Han family young master spoke, the people at the top of the mountain had already begun to move. Although they couldn't accurately count the number of people, they could roughly estimate the number. Just like what Han family young master said, almost everyone had rushed down the mountain. "Ha ha ha ha, you guessed wrong. They've all gone down the mountain." Just as everyone was laughing at them, they heard Han family young master sigh and say unhurriedly, "This is the 3rd habit that they have developed. Although there are only 6 of us, no one knows exactly how much energy the 6 of us have. Can we fight against 10 people? 20? 30? Or even more? Therefore, when they have to split into 2 groups, they won't use the method that seems safe but is actually risky. They will sacrifice the rook to protect the general, leaving 2 or 3 people at the high point to enjoy the scenery, while the others continue to concentrate on searching. In this way, even if the people at the top of the mountain were to be ambushed, they would only lose 2 or 3 points and have a chance to turn the situation around. Since they guessed that we might ambush these 2 or 3 people, what if they set up an ambush there? Yutian Shinming said. That's a good question. Therefore, we are now lying in the forest. Do you think they set up an ambush at the top of the mountain? Han family young master said. Yutian Shinming was suddenly speechless. The other party rushed to the top of the mountain and dispersed not long after. Moreover, as they were neatly piled up and went down the mountain together, they didn't see any private activities. It indeed didn't look like they were going to set up an ambush. Now their main target must be the forest where they can't see the blind spots from the high point. Our forest is the closest, I'm afraid they'll be here soon, right? Brother, you shouted. Han family young master nodded. Up the tree. Unscathed in battle asked doubtfully. The previous battle in the forest to annihilate the Waterflower mercenary group could be said to be daunting but not dangerous. Moreover, after everyone analyzed and recalled, they felt that in that environment, Gu Fei was actually the only one who could use Blink to maintain his position and then use area of effect spells to ambush the people at the bottom of the tree. It seemed like the other party was completely helpless. No, the method from that day can't be used today. That requires the perfect terrain conditions. Today's forest isn't good enough to hide people. Han family young master said. Indeed, the forest they were in was small to begin with, and the trees were not luxuriant enough. They could still be used as cover from a distance, but if they were to really get under the trees and look up, they would definitely not be able to hide anyone in the trees. Retreat quickly, we'll be discovered if we move any closer. The people at the top of the mountain were already halfway down. Han family young master shouted and took the lead to move. This way. If we leave the forest like this, won't we be discovered by the eyes at the top of the mountain? Brother Yu was always very worried. Han family young master smiled and didn't answer. Everyone was already used to his arrogant manner of keeping people in suspense. Anyway, they knew that the arrangements he made under this appearance would eventually be daunting but not dangerous, so they didn't ask any more and followed behind him through the forest. The view from the top of the mountain was still blocked by the forest for the time being. The young master of the Han family led the way and took a small detour around the forest. Suddenly, a half-tall broken wall appeared in front of them. The young master of the Han family crouched behind the wall and waved at them. The few of them squatted down in surprise and followed him. This cover naturally blocked the view from the top of the mountain. Unscathed in battle was stunned. Did you draw this map? Don't talk first. Han family young master led the way in front. This wall was actually quite long. Due to the different degrees of damage, some places could be walked straight, some places needed to squat down, and some even needed to lie down. In short, everyone followed behind Han family young master and walked in the appropriate places using the proper posture. The terrain in front of them suddenly became lower. Han family young master turned around and said, "Move faster." After saying that, he dodged and crawled down into the depression. The posture of the few people behind them didn't show any beauty. When it was Gu Fei's turn and Sword Demon's turn, one used teleportation and dodged down, while the other used stealth and swaggered down. They looked at the four of them and smiled foolishly. The four of them didn't have any temper. Unscathed in battle raised his previous doubt again. Did you draw this map? Although he knew it was impossible, how did Han family young master know that there was a wall that could block the view from the top of the mountain, since it was their first time entering this map? Han family young master said lazily, "Pay attention and observe." That was the answer to Unscathed in Battle's question. Where can we go from here? Brother Yu immediately started to observe. He first observed the path in front of them. We can almost reach the bottom of the mountain. Let's wait for them to go far before we act. Han family young master said. You've observed it before. I didn't observe it. I searched for it. Han family young master had a lecturing look on his face again. I've been paying attention to the height of the mountain and the surrounding terrain since the beginning. That's why I purposely found this path that basically belongs to the blind spot on the top of the mountain. I see. Brother Yu admired Han family young master's observation skills. Han family young master was naturally very proud. However, when he looked at the other four, they didn't listen to him at all. Unscathed in Battle and Sword Demon stared blankly. No one knew what they were thinking. On the other side, Gu Fei held the straw hat that Yutian Shinming had just wove in the forest. You're quite skillful. Who did you learn this from? Ha, it's nothing. Yutian Shinming was also feeling proud over there. Han family young master was furious, but he couldn't let it out. He stared at the four of them and said, wait for them to finish searching the forest and move further away. We'll sneak attack the top of the mountain. Since this is the blind spot on the top of the mountain, they'll probably search here, right? Brother Yu said. This is a blind spot that only I would notice. They'll definitely ignore this place when they look from the top of the mountain. As the young master of the Han family was speaking, his eyes casually glanced over and his anger flared up again. He suddenly roared at Gu Fei, Qianli, stand close to the inside, stick close to the side. His perfect plan was almost ruined by this fellow's careless positioning. Teleportation, move. Gu Fei said. He moved closer and continued to speak to Yutian Shinming. How are these connected? Oh, like this, and then like this. Yutian Shinming took off the straw hat to demonstrate. Butterfly knot, can the sneak attack plan on the top of the mountain be carried out smoothly? Chapter 257. The six of them stayed close to the edge of the depression for a while. Just as Han family young master had expected, no one from the Black Hand mercenary group came over to investigate. Seeing that it was about time, Han family young master shook his head and everyone followed him to move forward. Just as he had said, when they reached the foot of the peak, Han family young master suddenly stopped. "Continue, what are you stopping for?" the group of people shouted. It was very tiring to crouch and stick close to the edge. They had been looking forward to reaching their destination and being free. Han family young master pointed forward. "This part is not a blind spot. If we are lucky and no one is looking in this direction, we might be able to avoid it. Otherwise, we will definitely be discovered. Also, this part is our blind spot and we can't see the situation at the peak. It seems like..." They still looked back. Han family young master smiled and looked at Gu Fei and Sword Demon. "Aren't you two pretty awesome? Only you two can take care of the rest." "My pleasure." Gu Fei pulled out his sword and saluted. He walked to Han family young master's position and cast a teleportation spell. With a whoosh, he floated past the blind spot. Sword Demon, who had always been calm, was also excited at this moment. Why? He finally had a chance to show off. No matter what, Sword Demon was a qualified gamer. He had all the characteristics of an MMORPG, which was very different from Gu Fei. After activating stealth, the Sword Ghost also traversed this section of the road. Han family young master was behind them and began to speak in the mercenary channel. "Okay, follow my instructions." Then there was a series of coordinates. The two of them were very familiar with it and didn't ask much. They just followed the instructions. Just like that, they felt their way up the mountain. There was no movement around them at all. The sneak attack route that Han family young master found was real. "Let us know when the fight starts. We can come and help too," Yutian Shinming said in the channel. "Hee, I don't think that's necessary, right?" Gu Fei said arrogantly. "Keep the channel clean. Keep your trash talk to one side." Han family young master scolded. Following the Han family young master's instructions, the two of them headed up the mountain. Finally, there was no such blind path for sneak attacks for the last 20 to 30 meters. This place was almost under the opponent's nose. If there was a blind lane, then there must be an underground tunnel. "Think of a way yourself," Han family young master said. "Let's go." "What are you waiting for?" Gu Fei suggested. Sprinting this distance would only take an instant, and they could also teleport 5 meters in between. Sword Demon nodded in agreement. With their backs against the boulder behind them, they looked at each other and nodded. At the same time, they began to count in their hearts. 1, 2, 3. One on the left and one on the right, Sword Demon and Gu Fei suddenly came out from behind the boulder. The person on the hillside had already seen it clearly. Luckily, this brat actually turned his head to talk to the person behind him and didn't look in their direction. This gave the two an opportunity. They flew forward and in the blink of an eye, they were already 10 meters away. At this time, the guy on the hilltop turned his head with a face full of smiles. After seeing the two of them suddenly appear, he was startled. His reaction was also very quick. He raised his hand and released an arrow, then turned his head and retreated. The person on the hilltop as an eye should be an archer. Han family young master had already analyzed this way. Firstly, archers had the eagle eye skill after changing their job. Secondly, when archers discovered someone attacking the hilltop, they could use the advantage of attack distance to delay some time. Thirdly, archers' movement speed was very fast. If they couldn't hold on, they could still continue to delay time by running away. Everything was as Han family young master expected. The kid on the hilltop was indeed an archer. Moreover, he had already drawn his arrow and was waiting. As soon as he saw the two of them, he raised his hand and shot an arrow without thinking. It was actually a homing arrow. The arrow emitted a white light as it flew towards Gu Fei. It seemed that the opponent's apprehension of instantly killing a mage was definitely not fake. However, how could such a weak arrow stop Gu Fei? The Night Streamer's sword was raised in front of his chest. It seemed like it was just a casual move, but it was actually a move from the Gu family's sword technique, night fights in all directions. Not to mention the front, even if there was an attack from all directions, Gu Fei could still instantly attack the enemy from the calmest and most effective angle. The arrow that shot towards him was easily pushed away by Gu Fei's wrist. His momentum didn't decrease at all. On the other hand, Sword Demon admired Gu Fei's movements. He was full of admiration and couldn't help but slow down a bit. However, this arrow didn't have any effect in blocking them. The two of them almost rushed up the hilltop at the same time. At the top of the hill, there were indeed 3 people on the other side. At this time, they were already prepared for battle. Han family young master's estimation was actually off. The opponent's eyes weren't all archers. There was only one. The other 2, judging from their attire, were a Grand Master of Combat and a mage. What was even stranger was that all 3 of them had their faces covered. Did that archer just now have his face covered? Gu Fei asked Sword Demon. I don't know. I didn't pay attention. That archer had his face turned away to talk. The 2 of them were too busy being happy about it. However, when he turned his head and raised his hand to release the arrow, there was a white light. His face. Gu Fei tried hard to recall. It seemed like it was covered with a cloth. Why did he have his face covered? Now wasn't the time to ask questions. The 2 of them were here for a sneak attack. Making the best use of time to finish the battle was the way of the king. Acting cool and spouting nonsense at a crucial moment was something only a retarded villain would do. The 2 of them rushed up side by side. The archer and the Grand Master of Combat were originally guarding the mage from the left and right. At this time, they immediately spread out to the left and right. It seemed like the 3 of them wanted to attack the 2 of them in a triangular formation. As a martial arts practitioner, Gu Fei was very observant and attentive when fighting. Naturally, he was very meticulous in his work. The 2 of them spread out to the left and right. It seemed like they were surrounding him, but the distance between them seemed to be increasing. It was understandable for the archer to increase the distance, but for the Grand Master of Combat to do the same, it was really puzzling. At this time, Sword Demon, who was faster than Gu Fei, had already rushed close to the mage. The bright dagger was already out. Gu Fei could see it clearly. He was holding a long slash. As expected, he was eager to use a new weapon to test it out. The mage didn't panic. He raised the staff in his hand as if he was about to attack. The archer and the Grand Master of Combat who had dodged to the side had stopped in their tracks. They didn't attack, but looked at the mage together. Only a professional like Gu Fei could notice the subtle changes in every moment of the battle. Suddenly, he was shocked. A thought flashed through his mind. He didn't have time to think about it. He shouted at Sword Demon, "Retreat!" At the same time, he quickly chanted a teleportation spell. Gu Fei didn't even need time to float back 5 meters. The mage had obviously finished his chant at this time. A spark seemed to bloom from his staff. It landed on the ground, and then there was a loud bang. The raging flame bloomed like a huge flower petal the moment the spark landed on the ground. This was the signature skill of the Parallel World's #1 mage, drifting, falling red lotus. No wonder he covered his face. He just didn't want to be recognized by Gu Fei. No wonder the archer and the Grand Master of Combat immediately circled to the sides when the battle started. They wanted to avoid the burning range of the falling red lotus. These 2 people were, of course, Drifting's, left hand right love, and, right hand handsome. Gu Fei's teleportation was a bit faster than the falling red lotus. He only needed to take a few steps back to escape. But Sword Demon was different. He didn't have a movement skill like teleportation that didn't have time. Although he retreated without hesitation when he heard Gu Fei's shout and didn't even bother to turn around, looking at the current situation, Sword Demon's movement was still not faster than the blooming of the red lotus. After Gu Fei saw the situation in front of him, he immediately chanted again. In an instant, a twisted net-like wall that seemed like it would tear at any time suddenly appeared in front of Sword Demon. It could be said that Gu Fei had put his hidden weapon skills to the extreme when he released this spell. He had calculated the movement speed of the sword ghoul and the speed of the red lotus blooming in an instant, and accurately placed the electric wall between the sword ghoul and the red flames. Isn't it able to block everything? Block it for me to see. Gu Fei thought in his heart. At this time, that was all he could do. This sudden change was obviously unexpected even for the opponent. After the sorcerer cast his spell, most of it was out of his control. When the blooming red lotus rushed towards the electric wall, it was actually blocked. The fire that should have spread 360 degrees around the sorcerer actually left a path behind the electric wall. According to the skill description, the electric wall could last up to 20 seconds. Under the impact of such a flame, the light faded very quickly. After only 3 seconds, the electric wall finally let out a sigh and was swallowed by the flame. The red lotus flame that had been blocked for a long time seemed to have accumulated anger. This impact made it even more ferocious and rushed to the previous empty space. But it was too late. 3 seconds was enough for Sword Demon to retreat from the dangerous place. Gu Fei let out a long breath and stood side by side with Sword Demon. The eyes of the 3 opponents were also filled with disbelief. The sorcerer in the flame took off his mask and looked at Gu Fei. As expected, it was drifting. Everyone says that you're a close combat sorcerer. You're good at close combat. Just this, you're stronger than me. Drifting said. Gu Fei smiled and said, that was close. But it's not over yet. Drifting also smiled. Of course. As Gu Fei spoke, he suddenly turned around and slashed. A thief gradually appeared while dodging. Gu Fei didn't use any skills. Although he hit the opponent, the damage was limited. Looks like the rumor that you have anti-stealth is true, Drifting said. So there aren't 3 people on the top of the mountain, but 4, Gu Fei said. His left hand wrote love, and his right hand wrote handsome. He had already taken off his mask. The 2 versus 4 battle was about to begin. Chapter 258. In the end, young Master Han's calculations were still wrong. The opponent had indeed divided the team into one big and one small, but it wasn't a strategy of sacrificing a pawn to protect the king. The reason for this kind of error was due to the lack of information. Han family young master, of course, didn't expect that there would be experts at the level of the 5 roaches in the opponent's team. Drifting stayed here as an eye, but he had the strength to wait for the child elite group to rush up and fight it out. If Gu Fei hadn't reacted at the last moment, if he hadn't learned Wall of Electricity before the match, even if he could have dodged it, Sword Demon would have been killed by Drifting's falling red lotus. At this moment, Sword Ghost also had a lingering fear in his heart. He and Gu Fei stood back to back while the other 4 surrounded them in a diamond formation. The flames of the falling clothes red lotus were too bright. The moment it bloomed, it had already transmitted the signal to every corner of the map. Whether it was the Black Hand mercenary group or the Young Master elite group, everyone who was looking at the peak of the mountain knew that something had happened. The people from the Black Hand mercenary group obviously had an agreement. They were carefully searching the forest in the distance, and they immediately came back. The people from the Child Elite group were at the foot of the mountain. Seeing this, they knew that the fight had started, and they immediately rushed up to the top of the mountain. What was that? Brother, you said in surprise. That kind of fire was obviously not something that could be produced by the 2 area of effect spells that the mages currently had. The others naturally didn't know, and they could only ask in the mercenary channel. It was Drifting. Sword Demon was very familiar with online chat, and he quickly replied. Oh. Yu Tian Shinming suddenly understood. I heard from Qianli that drifting had a skill that came with his weapon. It was very arrogant. What? Everyone asked. TSK, why should I remember that rubbish skill? Yu Tian Shinming had a look of contempt on his face, but in his heart, he was thinking, falling clothes and red lotus, looking at this momentum, the lethality of this spell is probably not small. Both sides were rushing towards the top of the mountain. The child elite group was naturally much faster, but the top of the mountain was already in a mess. Under Gu Fei's cover, the sword spectre attempted to sneak away under everyone's watchful eyes. However, drifting reacted quickly. As soon as he saw the sword spectre's silhouette start to move, he immediately raised his hand, wanting to smash down with a skyfall firewheel. But Gu Fei and the sword demon were also experienced people. Seeing the mages move their hands to dodge the spells, this kind of thing was easy for them. When the sky that drifting pointed at began to burn, the two of them had already rushed forward, one to the left. Sword demon charged at the right-hand commander, the archer, while Gu Fei charged at drifting, the archmage. The right-hand commander obviously wasn't stupid enough to fight a thief in close combat, so he turned around and ran. Sword demon had just used haste, and it was still on cooldown. Without this skill, the thief's speed was lower than the archer's. Even though sword demon had a good pair of wind-chasing boots, their speed was still about the same. It wasn't the kind of situation where drifting would be able to catch up in the blink of an eye. The sword ghost also straightened out his thoughts. He chased after drifting for 2 steps, then turned around and rushed toward drifting. At first glance, it seemed that sword demon was playing a game with the right-hand commander. He wanted to catch drifting, but the right-hand commander ran away, so he suddenly turned around and suddenly caught drifting. It was so cute. However, as a mage, drifting didn't have anyone to protect him. Gu Fei felt that he was a bit careless. He probably didn't expect that the falling clothes and red lotus wouldn't achieve the desired effect. Skill weapons had 2 characteristics. One was that they didn't need to be trained, so they were as powerful as they could be. They wouldn't change as the skills in the player's skill tree would. In addition, weapon skills usually had a big weakness, which was a long cooldown. The two believed that the falling clothes and red lotus wouldn't be able to explode again so soon, so they rushed forward without hesitation. Drifting didn't panic. He gently raised the staff that had just released Skyfall Fire Will in front of his chest and chanted, Ice Shadow. Scatter. Another new spell. Gu Fei and Sword Demon murmured in their hearts, but they weren't too surprised. Obviously, these masters were richer than the guys from Child Elite Group. They had endless scrolls and equipment. Gu Fei's Against the Current also had a skill called Frozen Ice Path. He used it to pave a path with ice on the ground. It was quite beautiful. Sword Demon was more cautious. He saw that there was a new skill, but he didn't know what it was used for, so he stopped. Gu Fei was more bold. He didn't care what skill it was, so he went up and cut it with his sword. Gu Fei had used Electric Wall and Teleportation. If he used his mana to attack now, he could only use Double Flame Flash, Fireball, or Lightning. Maybe Drifting's spell defense was very high, so spell attacks couldn't kill him. But he was a mage, so he could stab him to death with a sword. Gu Fei continued to rush forward while concentrating. He had to react to Drifting's spell as soon as possible. After chanting, Drifting's body suddenly turned into ice and snow. Drifting stood in the middle and smiled innocently. The ice and snow had disappeared. The sword ghost was very puzzled. This spell didn't hurt or harm anyone. The wind and snow just fluttered and then disappeared. What kind of mystery was this? Gu Fei, on the other hand, had already stopped in his tracks. Observing his surroundings, he instantly discovered that he and the sword ghost had been surrounded again, and this time, they were surrounded by Drifting. At this time, there was a Drifting standing in each of their 4 corners. 4 of Drifting appeared at once. Ice Whirlwind, Spin. For drifting's movements, the same sound, and the same 4 ice whirlwinds drifted toward Gu Fei from different directions. This type of skill that allowed a physical body to create an incorporeal body was very common in the game. However, whether or not the incorporeal body could deal damage depended on the skill. But at this time, 4 ice whirlwinds were coming, and one of them was the real drifting. He had to dodge. This kind of skill was very difficult to deal with in PvP. Unfortunately, drifting had encountered Gu Fei this time. His killer aura detection skill was activated again. After careful observation, he knew which of the 4 directions was the real drifting. It was drifting's bad luck. If he had created an incorporeal body and stood closely together with his real body, Gu Fei wouldn't have been able to judge which of the 4 drifting was the real one based on his killer aura. But at this time, in order to show off the power of this skill, he made a small encirclement with the incorporeal body, so Gu Fei could judge which one was the real one from the direction. Teleport, move. Gu Fei waved his finger, and with a whoosh, he flew out. In a flash, he was behind one of the drifters. He raised his hand and slashed. Drifting's ice shadow skill was a continuous skill. The incorporeal body created wouldn't be interrupted when the real body was attacked. But at this time, Gu Fei could see where the real body was, and drifting was shocked. Even if he had to choose one of the 4, there was still a 25% chance that he would get it right. But Gu Fei didn't test it at all. He just used teleport and flew over. How confident was he in that stab? Drifting looked back in panic after being hit. Gu Fei looked at him innocently, smiled, and said, "It's not working." The power of ice shadow was also shown at this moment. While drifting was looking back at Gu Fei in panic, the 3 phantoms also followed suit. They turned their heads back and pretended to be panicked. This made right love left hand, right handsome right hand, and right love left hand, who were in the outer circle, feel a chill run down their spines. An incorporeal body replicating the real body. Ice shadow. Yes, I'll remember this. Sword Demon saw this scene. Obviously, he thought that this was a weakness of ice shadow, and this weakness was very serious. If one was careful enough, it would be easy to distinguish the real body. At this time, Gu Fei had already used his second slash. After using teleport, his mana was completely depleted. He couldn't use any skills, so he could only stab at drifting. If this was a one-on-one fight, it would be cruel and helpless for drifting. Luckily, he had helpers. When they saw this, they all reached out to help. Right handsome right hand shot a homing arrow at Gu Fei, right love left hand went up to challenge Sword Demon, and the other thief bravely pounced at Gu Fei. Gu Fei wanted to get rid of drifting as soon as possible, so he ignored the homing arrow. This skill had a high hit rate and weak attack, so it was impossible for it to be used as a main attack skill. It was basically used to besiege Wei to save drifting. Gu Fei ignored it and continued to stab at drifting after taking the arrow. After the 3rd slash, drifting wasn't dead yet. He couldn't escape even if he wanted to. His chanting and casting were always interrupted. The thief ran fast, but he couldn't be faster than Gu Fei's attacks. Seeing that drifting couldn't be saved, this guy actually smiled again and suddenly said, "Falling clothes." The cooldown of falling clothes Red Lotus wasn't as long as expected. He knew that his chanting would be interrupted, but he still wanted to sing. Was this skill not afraid of being interrupted? In a split second, thoughts flashed through Gu Fei's mind. He didn't stop drifting whenever he heard that he wanted to sing. Instead, Gu Fei's empty left hand quickly reached up. Drifting had just finished saying the word, Red Lotus, and was about to say, open, when his mouth was blocked by Gu Fei. Drifting was shocked. He didn't expect Gu Fei to use such a method. Facing anyone, Gu Fei's strength was at a disadvantage, but this time, it was drifting. They were both sorcerers, and his strength was at the same level as Gu Fei. Under Gu Fei's effective use of strength, drifting was directly pressed to the ground by Gu Fei's slap. If I let go now and shout, open, will it still explode? Gu Fei didn't know enough about the game, so he didn't dare to make a judgment. He was very distressed. In the end, drifting suffered. He was pressed to the ground by Gu Fei. He was so depressed that he wanted to die. What's going on? Another voice came. At the foot of the mountain, the elite group finally climbed up the mountain. They saw that there were 4 drifting on the mountain top, and one of them was pressed to the ground by Gu Fei. They were immediately stunned. Chapter 259. Don't talk nonsense, hurry up and help. The Han family young master stood at the top of the mountain and looked into the distance. He immediately saw the Black Hand mercenary group's troops rolling over. As for drifting, left hand Love, and right hand Handsome, they weren't in his line of sight. Drifting, let's decide the winner. Yutian Shinming was very excited. He roared and rushed forward while asking, which one? As an expert, of course he had some knowledge. Seeing so many drifters, he knew that it was just a skill to create clones. There was no need to make a fuss. For Yutian Shinming, maybe it was good to have 4 drifters for him to vent at the same time. Nonsense. See which one it is. Gu Fei roared. Yutian Shinming's, which one, was a bit unprofessional, but he was smart. When the other experts saw it, they knew that the one Gu Fei pressed was the real one. Why? Because even though the other 3 weren't pressed, they were still on the ground, baring their fangs and claws. If the one Gu Fei pressed was fake, then one of the 3 was just drifting acting. God, this guy really knew how to give up his pride. Yutian Shinming finally reacted and walked over proudly. He looked at drifting on the ground and laughed, little guy, this is what you get. Gu Fei wanted to curse. He was just a mage. Pressing drifting down was a technique. Pressing him down so firmly required strength. Fortunately, drifting was weak, but it wasn't easy. If he loosened his grip and drifting opened his mouth to say, open, what if falling red lotus exploded? Imperial God Ming was still laughing maniacally, when the little thief rushed over, his right hand riding Handsome arrow shot over. In actual combat, Yutian Shinming wasn't careless, but he set his target on right hand Handsome. After dodging the arrow, he immediately shot back. This guy was really smart. He knew that no matter how skilled he was, it would be troublesome to fight a thief in close combat. Thus, he quickly dodged and shot at right hand Handsome. Fuck! Gu Fei panicked. They were still drifting in the sealed mouth. How could they have the time to deal with bandits? Yutian Shinming had actually left him behind. Gu Fei really regretted putting himself in such a situation. If he gave up now, and drifting's shout of open still worked, then it would be big trouble. However, it had to be said that the members of the elite team were quite reliable at critical moments. Yutian Shinming had hooked away the right-hand commander. Just when Gu Fei thought the thief was about to chop him up, Unscathed in Battle had already arrived with a charge, stabbing into the thief's waist. The bandit let out a blood-curdling scream as he was sent flying by Zhan Wushang's attack. Beside him was the side of the mountain, so he tumbled down. Hence, the blood-curdling screams didn't stop, echoing from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. The people who were fighting on the mountaintop couldn't help but stop and look down from the mountainside. That's too cruel, Love Left Hand said. Yeah. Sword Demon nodded. That's too much. Yutian Shinming also said. I didn't do it on purpose, Unscathed in Battle said helplessly. He just chose the most effective way to attack in that situation. Even the Black Hand mercenary group, who were marching from the mountaintop to the foot of the mountain, couldn't help but stop when they heard the screams from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. What is that? Someone was confused. It sounds like some scary creature. Fuck, do they have pets? Are there pets in parallel worlds? There was endless discussion, the only one who was still busy was Gu Fei. At this point, he still wasn't sure if drifting's open would still be useful. Seeing that the others had stopped fighting and had run to the mountainside to enjoy the scenery, he was really angry and anxious. After 2 roars, the group of people seemed to wake up from a dream. Standing next to Sword Ghost was Love Left Hand, and the 2 of them immediately began to brawl again. Next to Yutian Shinming was Love Left Hand. The 2 immediately took a few steps back and started shooting again. Unscathed in battle turned around to deal with Drifting, who was being held down by Gu Fei. Yutian Shinming was anxious. No, leave that to me. Fuck you, hurry up. Gu Fei finally couldn't help but curse. As a teacher, he was already careful enough, but this was life. There would always be times when you were depressed to the point of wanting to die. At this time, cursing would be very effective, especially for people who didn't often curse. Why not? Yutian Shinming seemed to want to kill Drifting himself. Seeing that Unscathed in battle ignored him and continued to move forward, he shouted, Gongzi. He didn't care about Love Left Hand and shot a sharp shot at Drifting, who was on the ground. Wahahaha, trash Drifting, I finally killed you. You're still tens of thousands of Qinli away from me. Love Left Hand had killed a mage who had lost his resistance and lost a lot of his HP to Gu Fei. This made Yutian Shinming proud like never before. The arrows in his right hand were also hit by the Imperial God's Cry. However, the young master he had shouted earlier had taken effect. The Han family's young master's recovery technique had healed him just in time. They only had 2 people on their side, while the other side had 6, including a cleric. Right Love Left Hand and Right Handsome Right Hand were no longer stupid enough to die. Right Handsome Right Hand threw a homing arrow at Imperial Divine Ming before descending the mountain. Right Love Left Hand wanted to run away, but he was in close combat, and his opponent was a sword demon that had a speed of over 100 meters, so how could he run away so easily? Brother Yu, who had nothing to do, also came to help. Under the pincer attack, Love Left Hand's punches and kicks were ignored. Love Left Hand's punches and kicks were easily and effectively killed. Love Left Hand's speed was fast enough. The speed of the right-hand man was extremely fast. In just a short while, he had already run down a third of the mountain. Imperial Sky Shinming wanted to give chase, but was stopped by the Han family young master. The other side is coming, run. The other members of the Black Hand mercenary group were already rushing over. Gu Fei didn't even have time to eat a fruit before he followed them down the mountain. On the way, Drifting sent him a message. He said gloomily, You can't do this. Your magic is too strong. You were forced to do it, Gu Fei replied. If you do this again, I'll bite your hand. Drifting said. No way. You're the #1 mage. How could you do something so disrespectful? Gu Fei smiled. He didn't think much of it. If he could open his mouth and bite his hand, how could he not say the word open? They hurried down the mountain. The sneak attack on the highest peak was considered a success, but in reality, they only got 3 points. No matter how strong Drifting was, he was only 1 point in front of the system. After descending the mountain, the 6 of them went back into the marsh where they were hiding. Gu Fei finally had some free time. He picked up a fruit and was about to eat it when he suddenly remembered that his palm was stained with that guy's saliva when he blocked Drifting's mouth. Thinking about it, he felt disgusted. He quickly put the sword in his pocket and switched the fruit to his right hand. Where do we go now? Brother Yu asked. We don't need to go anywhere. We'll just stay here, Han family young master said. Huh? They can't see us up the mountain, so they can only search again. This is still a blind spot they don't know about. So, they can't even find the place they searched once. They have to start all over again. So, we'll leave 2 or 3 eyes, go down the mountain, and then, no way. Is it that simple? The masters had already understood Han family young master's intention. He was using the blind spot at the foot of the mountain to successfully sneak attack the Black Hand mercenary group into an endless loop. Both sides sneak attacked and searched. It was as if they were repeating the system's quests. We'll do this dozens of times and then we'll sneak attack all of them. Yutian Shenming said in disbelief. If they were NPCs, they would probably be killed so easily, Han family young master said. Unfortunately, they're humans. If they had some brains, they would have thought that we would sneak attack again. Oh, you're right. Then, they know that we can't split up. But if we leave 3 or 5 people here, it's obviously giving away points. It's not good even with a master like drifting. What will they do? Han family young master said. They quietly looked at Han family young master, waiting for him to announce the answer. Please look forward to it. The Han family's young master said quietly. Fuck. The masters were depressed. This time, it wasn't that Han family young master was keeping them in suspense. He really couldn't predict what the opponent would do in this difficult situation. He wasn't familiar with the opponent, so he couldn't understand the opponent's thoughts. Han family young master had thought of a few plans. He could only wait and see which of his ideas matched the opponent's. The Black Hand mercenary group ran back to the mountain top from afar, panting. The 6 of them were long gone. They circled around the mountain top and looked into the distance. They saw a person standing in the field like a fool. After asking, they found out that it was Right-Hand Commander. He had run all the way up the mountain, and he had gone down. If it was a normal guild, this kind of fighting would easily make them feel like they were being tricked and lose their composure. However, the Black Hand mercenary group was created to complete quests. Since the invincible and shameless system could tolerate it, they could take this kind of thing. Just as Han family young master expected, there were still some people who were smart enough to guess that they would sneak attack again. It was necessary to keep an eye on them, but it was impossible to keep 3 or 4 people as an eye on them. If 3 or 4 people couldn't stay, then naturally, they would all stay. Everyone stay. Xiaoxi, Xiaoying. The leader pointed at several people with his black index finger. You guys go find a forest and look around. Report as soon as you find something. Oh. The few members accepted the order and went down the mountain in different directions. Chapter 260. A few of the group members went down the mountain to look for the 2 people. The discussion on the mountain was still going on. Some of the less intelligent people sighed. This is great. We should have done this a long time ago. Why do we need to form a large group to look for them? We can just wait here. The black index finger looked down on those who had such a point of view. Going to such a big forest to look for them alone, if the other party doesn't want to take advantage of him, they can easily avoid him. It's useless. Why do we still go if it's useless? The group members didn't understand. The black index finger smiled mysteriously. He looked at a certain figure who was climbing up the mountain and said, "We'll talk later." The person who was climbing up the mountain was the remaining member of the group of 4. He arrived at the top of the mountain in no time and reported to the black index finger. Come, tell us in detail what happened just now. The black index finger called a group of people and analyzed the situation while listening to the right hand's explanation. At least 2 points. After listening to the explanation, the black index finger pointed at 2 of his fingers and said, "First, the other party can observe our movements, so they can seize the best opportunity to launch a sneak attack." Everyone nodded. Second, there is a path from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, but the people at the top of the mountain can't see it, the black index finger said. Everyone couldn't help but look down the mountain, trying to find this secret path. They rushed up from here, right? The black index finger came to the side of the mountain and looked down while asking the right hand's rider. The right hand's rider nodded. He was the first to discover Gu Fei and the sword demon. Where did they appear from? The black index finger asked. The right hand's rider pointed at the big rock. The 2 of them suddenly came out from behind that rock. Everyone's heart tightened. Could they be behind that rock now? Right under our eyes? That's why the most dangerous place is the safest. Everyone whispered. Black Index Finger didn't think that the culprit would hide in such a dangerous and conspicuous place, but after listening to his subordinates' mutterings, he also thought that the culprit might be bold enough to do something that seemed impossible. It was always better to be cautious. The Black Index Finger asked the archers to be on full alert, and he also asked a few mages to come forward. They bombarded the boulder with fire wheels and fiery trees, but the boulder was still smoking. Finally, they were sure that there was no one hiding behind the boulder. Then he continued to ask people to keep a close eye on the movements of the surrounding grass and trees. Black Index Finger and a few people came to the back of the boulder for field inspection. This is the last place they set up on their way up the mountain. After that, they immediately launched an attack. The Black Index Finger touched the boulder and said, "Before this, you didn't notice their movements at all?" "Absolutely not." The right-hand scribe said, "I didn't even blink. They just popped out from behind the rock." In fact, when Gu Fei and Sword Demon first appeared, Right-Handed Rider was still twisting his neck and talking cheerfully with the people behind him. He didn't even blink his eyes when he talked about it before. In fact, Right-Handed Rider didn't see it with his own eyes, but he made a judgment based on the situation at that time. But it was not wrong. The Black Index Finger leaned against the boulder and looked down the mountain. "This boulder can block our sight from here to the bottom of the mountain." "It can't be. Even if it can, they wouldn't do it this way. I didn't always stand in the direction of the boulder, I often walked left and right." Right-Handed Rider said. "Then you'll turn a blind eye to it." Black Index Finger and the others looked around and saw many big holes in the strange rocks and trees that could block their sight. It seems that they used these as cover to slowly sneak up. So, the first people to come up here are only the mages and the thieves. Because the mages can teleport, and the thieves can sneak. Only the two of them could use these cover to cross each other and not be seen by you. After they reached the boulder, there was nothing to hide, so they had to rush up directly. Black Index Finger analyzed. Everyone nodded. If they want to sneak up on us, they can only do the same thing. Their current position shouldn't be far from here. Hearing Black Index Finger's words, everyone's eyes followed the messy objects on the hillside and looked down. It was as if they had already seen 6 extremely wretched people. Continue searching in the forest. Leave a few people on the hilltop and pay attention to this direction. Everyone else, gather up and follow me to search the bottom of the mountain. Black Index Finger said. Isn't this giving them another chance to sneak up on us? Someone said. We won't go far. We'll only search near the foot of the mountain. If they dare to sneak up on us again, I'd like to see how they'll retreat this time. Black Index Finger laughed. He had already gathered more than 70 players in the group and left a few eyes on the hilltop. The others followed the path that seemed to be used for sneak attacks down the mountain. Along the way, none of the hiding spots escaped the Black Hand mercenary group's search. These places were like guiding lights, slowly leading them to the hiding spot of the child elite group. However, when they were less than 10 meters away from the hiding spot of the child elite group, the system suddenly announced that the child elite group had obtained another point and the Black Hand mercenary group had lost another member. Who died? Black Index Finger hurriedly checked. It's Littling, over here. Black Index Finger hurriedly gathered his men and rushed towards the small forest at the foot of the mountain. The few people in charge of searching the forest were clearly assigned by him. This was so that they could react at the first moment. Littling, how did he die? Everyone rushed over while asking about the situation in the mercenary channel. I don't know. I was looking in the forest and didn't see anyone. I heard an arrow and saw the archer. Then, a thief stabbed him in the back and he died just like that. Everyone, hurry up. Don't let them escape. Black Index Finger urged and led the group towards the small forest. Those on the hilltop, pay attention to the forest here. Report the direction immediately if anyone rushes out. Understood. The players on the hilltop adjusted their focus and paid close attention to the direction. It didn't take long before Black Index Finger and a group of brothers rushed out of the small forest. Just as they were about to charge in, they suddenly heard the eyes on the hilltop report, 2 people ran out of the forest. 2 people. Only 2 people. Black Index Finger confirmed. Yes, 2 very fast people. Profession unknown, the eyes on the hilltop reported. Even an archer with eagle eye couldn't determine the profession of the other party from their attire at such a distance. Should we chase them? Someone asked. The Black Index Finger smiled confidently. It's a diversion. The 6 people in the child elite group, other than the thief and the archer, the mage is also very fast, but the other 3 don't have this advantage. We have already surrounded them and they definitely won't be able to escape. That's why they told the 2 fast guys to run and lure us away so they can find another place to hide. Unfortunately, I won't fall for their trick. Everyone, enter the forest now. There must be people in the forest. If they know that they won't be able to escape after being exposed, why did they kill Little Shadow and expose themselves? Someone was confused. This forest is too small. It's not easy to hide 6 people. I don't think they have a choice. Black Index Finger said as he led a dozen people into the forest. The forest was indeed very small. 70 people searched without much effort. The Black Hand mercenaries quickly discovered that there was no one else in the forest besides them. Black Index Finger's expression turned ugly. Is this a diversion? Someone snickered and looked down on the leader. Such a harmonious relationship between a leader and his subordinates could only exist in the game. Where did the 2 of them go? Black Index Finger asked helplessly in the channel. He finally knew where the 2 of them were. I've been watching them. The eyes replied. Point them in the right direction. We'll chase them down. The leadership was temporarily handed over to the eyes on the hilltop. Because the young master elite group's kiting tactic was too famous, the Black Hand mercenary group had actually been practicing chasing after people who were running away these past 3 days. Understood. The eyes on the hilltop replied. Just as he was about to give orders, someone suddenly shouted, "Fuck, someone's coming up." The exclamation was broadcasted in the channel at the same time. The Black Index Finger suddenly froze and asked in surprise, "Who's coming up?" "That mage." The eyes on the hilltop replied to Black Index Finger. What kind of skill did Gu Fei have? This time, the eyes on the hilltop wasn't an expert like drifting. He dashed up the hill and used dual flame flash and lightning spell to send them out of the field. Child elite group, another 3 points. The Black Hand mercenaries had just left the small forest and were about to chase after the 2, but they were all frozen on the spot. Without the eyes on the hilltop, the Han family young master wasn't worried about exposing his position. He stood in the wind and said, "Even if it's a diversion, you still need to figure out the direction." Tisk. When the Black Hand mercenaries changed direction and rushed into the small forest, Gu Fei, who was still in the depression, continued on his journey. Hurry up. This was the Han family young master's reminder. Teleport, move. Gu Fei answered with action and immediately teleported out. In the chat, the Han family young master continued to report his coordinates, guiding Gu Fei's path forward. If he relied on teleportation or stealth, it would be impossible for him to move forward from behind cover, as it would waste too much time. Teleport's cooldown time was 1 minute, and stealth's cooldown time was 3 minutes. If he wanted to slowly climb up the hill, the match would be over by the time he reached the top. Teleport and stealth would only be used when he had no other choice. In fact, climbing the hill mainly depended on the Han family young master's coordinates. In this guy's eyes, the cover along the way was obviously not an individual, but a whole. Every time Gu Fei took a step forward, there might not be any cover around him, but from the top of the mountain to his current position, there would definitely be several cover around him, blocking his line of sight from all directions. Moreover, the Han family young master had also climbed up to the hilltop. When he looked down, he carefully observed the terrain and was even more familiar with the straight path. Everything was still within his meticulous calculations. If the black index finger followed the cover all the way down the hill, it was inevitable that it would find the 6 people in the depression. Therefore, after the Han family young master noticed the Black Hand mercenaries' movements, he immediately let Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming return to the small forest along the path they came from. The poor Black Hand member in the small forest, Xiaoying, was still looking for the whereabouts of the 6 people, but didn't know that he had already become their prey. Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming sneaked into the forest and immediately saw Xiaoying looking around. The two of them had long mastered sneak attacks when playing this profession, so they easily took down Xiaoying. After the black index finger heard the report, he immediately led the group to this side to capture them. At this time, he had already fallen into the Han family young master's trap. At the same time they left, Gu Fei began to climb up the hill. By the time they reached the forest, Gu Fei was almost at the hilltop. Of course, Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming had to run through the forest. Squatting there was only waiting for death. Although running out of the forest would immediately expose him to the eyes at the top of the hill, according to the Han family young master's calculations, it wouldn't take long for Gu Fei to rush up the hill and kill a few eyes. Without the eyes, he naturally couldn't encircle and intercept the escaping people. Just relying on speed, the Han family young master didn't worry about Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming at all. Who would have thought that the black index finger had so many ideas? When he came to the forest and saw that the people had run away, he didn't chase after them. At this time, he saw the intention of luring the tiger away from the hill. He wasted time in the forest. When he found that there was no one in the forest, Gu Fei had already climbed up the hill. The eyes at the top of the hill didn't even have time to report to the black index finger about Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming's movements before they were killed. At this time, 1/3 of the time of the match had passed. Child Elite Group was leading 7-0. Chapter 261. The weather in the game wasn't always the same. It would change from time to time. Even in the confrontation map, it was still the same way. At this moment, a small breeze suddenly blew. Gu Fei, who was at the highest point of the map, felt refreshed by the breeze. Han family young master was also in a good mood. He even joked with Gu Fei, "You look so stupid standing at the top of the mountain." The Black Hand mercenary group members were annoyed. It was the type of annoyance that couldn't be blown away no matter how strong the wind was. At this point, they still couldn't react and fell for the opponent's trick. Black index finger's head was a bit dizzy. Falling for the trap was falling for it. The key was that black index finger's confidence was a bit too much. Now, it was a bit difficult to clean up the mess. With so many brothers in front of them, they were embarrassed and didn't know what to say. Luckily, the Black Hand mercenary group members were quite kind. Even if they were mocking him in their hearts, they still showed a common enemy on their faces. Every one of them looked like they were going to skin the child elite group alive. The morale of the Black Hand mercenary group was boosted. "Old Black, what do we do now? Tell us." In the game, there were many more bosses than high-quality equipment. If you stood on the street and shouted, "Boss," 7 or 8 people would turn around. If you met a confused person, they might even treat you as their lackey. In order to not lose out, everyone gave their boss a different title. It was more intimate and easier to distinguish them from other bosses. Black Index Finger gazed at the mountain peak and said, "These guys aren't simple." It wasn't a coincidence that they were able to kill their way here. This praise wasn't without reason. Black Index Finger had just fallen for the trap and lost a lot of his reputation. Praising the opponent showed that he was broad-minded. At the same time, it was an explanation for his mistake. The opponent was very strong, so it was normal for him to lose out. Big bosses were always so shrewd. Now that they have points, will they start kiting the map? Someone was worried. The terror of kiting had already affected a generation of players in Cloud City. It's better if they use kiting. We didn't train for nothing, Black Index Finger said. The Black Index Finger said, "Now we're just afraid that they'll hide. This stupid map isn't as simple as we thought. There are still a lot of hidden places. We didn't pay much attention to it before." The Black Index Finger's words also revealed that the Han family young master's strategy was truly well prepared and based on intelligence. From the start of the mercenary battle, he had been paying attention to the types, changes, and formats of the maps. In addition to his research on the guild wars, the Han family young master had already paid attention to more than a dozen maps. Only then did the Black Index Finger realize that the map also had a lot of content, a lot of inside information, and a lot of connotations. If he wanted to start studying it again, he would only get himself in a hurry. There was no need to think about the content anymore. Therefore, the Black Index Finger did not ask his subordinates to study the map. Instead, he continued to analyze the situation of the enemy and himself. There are 6 enemies, only 6. It's impossible for them to confront us head-on, so they can only use this roundabout method. But in this way, the other 3 in their formation, namely the warrior, the paladin, and the priest, won't be able to keep up. Just like now, the rogue and the archer lured us here in the forest, and the sorcerer went up to the top of the mountain to destroy the eyes. Then what about these 3? Where are the 3 of them hiding? Everyone stared at the Black Index Finger in a daze, feeling that their boss was a bit crazy. Didn't the guild decide that the main mission of this final was to find the opponents 3 days before the battle began? Now that they were here, why was he still making a fuss about it? These 3 went up the mountain before, and then went down the mountain. With the 3 of them, they couldn't move too fast, so they couldn't go far down the mountain. After that, with our eyes, we didn't see anyone move, but the rogue and the archer came to this forest. The Black Index Finger muttered. Suddenly, he realized something and called the people around him. "Search the forest and find anything that can block the vision from the top of the mountain. Why don't we dare to split up? Because we're worried about the sorcerer's group ability, and we don't know how powerful they are when they work together. But now they are actually splitting up. Why should we be afraid? Let's split up into groups of 10. The Black Index Finger felt that he had found another big problem. "Old Black!" Someone shouted. It was the Black Index Finger. It was Solitude under the moon. That sorcerer doesn't just know how to cast spells. With his skills and strength, a group of 10 might not be able to defeat him. All right. The Black Index Finger had to respect the opinion of Solitude under the moon, who had fought against Gu Fei before. Then with 20 people, it should be no problem to deal with him, right? This shouldn't be a problem. Solitude did not dare to make a rash conclusion. That day, he had gathered people to stop Gu Fei. They had about the same number of people, but they had failed in the end. "You'll take 20 people and find a way to deal with him at the top of the mountain," the Black Index Finger said. Okay. Solitude was too ashamed to say that he was afraid of one person when he had brought 20 people with him. He immediately led the 20 people away. However, at this time, Gu Fei had occupied the top of the mountain and they did not know where he would ambush them. If they rushed up the mountain like this, it was possible that they would be scared away. It would be difficult to deal with them. You. Solitude Moonlight picked 3 people from his team. "You guys go around the back of the mountain and draw his attention there. We'll rush forward from the front." That was the only way Solitude Moonlight could think of. The 3 of them left the forest and went around the back of the mountain. According to Solitude's thoughts, if Gu Fei was at the top of the mountain, he would definitely keep an eye on the 3's movements. Then, if he chased after them, he would naturally not be able to take care of this direction. After all, the top of the mountain was not the tip of a pyramid. Squatting on the tip and twisting one's neck, one would be able to see in all directions. Otherwise, why would there be a need for 3 or 4 people to be the eyes? The 3 of them went. The team searching the surroundings of the forest had made quite a few discoveries. After the black index finger's screening, the 2 trenches and the wall that child elite group had climbed over stood out. They used these as cover to circle around the forest. Send a team to each path. If you follow the path, you'll find something. Perhaps it's where the 3 of them are hiding. Be careful to stay hidden. Hee, they definitely won't expect that the path they used to escape from our eyes on the top of the mountain will now become the Yellow Springs road that will send them out. The black index finger could not help but feel proud. The 80 people were split into 8 teams. 2 teams followed Solitude to surround and kill Gu Fei, and 3 teams followed the so-called Yellow Springs road. The black index finger had 3 teams with him, so he immediately split into 2 teams. You guys, follow this direction. This is the direction that the thief and archer escaped in. Try to expand the search area. After Solitude takes down the peak, he will give you instructions. The 2 teams obeyed and left. At this time, there were not many people with the black index finger. After all, there were not 80 people. Previously, he had sent a few people to search the forest. Xiaoying had been sacrificed, and the others had not returned. The black index finger looked left and right and left 1 person in the forest. Looks like they like this small forest. You hide here. If you find them, report immediately, but do not expose yourself. Got it? After making these arrangements, he felt that it was not a bad idea to wait for the hare to come. He immediately gave the same instructions to each of the members who were drifting in the other forests: stay in the forest, hide yourself, and report to me if you find anything. After making all the arrangements, the black index finger realized that he and the 3 people beside him had nothing to do. After a moment of hesitation, he left the forest with the other 3 and chased after Solitude's group. The 3 people sent by Solitude had already circled the back of the mountain, but they could not be sure that the eyes on the top of the mountain were not chasing after them. In any case, Solitude had already set off with his troops. It should not be a problem for 20 people to kill this sorcerer. The small wind continued to blow. On the map, the members of the Black Hand mercenary group were minding their own business, moving silently. Of the 2 teams that were climbing the ravine, one reached the end of the ravine very quickly, while the other crossed the small ravine and came to a large ravine. They did not know which way to go. After a moment of confusion, they threw a gold coin and finally decided to go right. They gradually moved further and further away. When they looked back, the highest peak was blurry. Old Black meant that the enemy should not be far from the foot of the mountain. This was obviously not the right way to go. The leader of the team thought. Damn it, stupid gold coin. Turn back, left, he shouted. The 3rd team did the same thing as the child elite group. They bent, crouched, rolled, and crawled behind the wall. When they reached the end of the wall, they naturally reached the depression. They were smart enough not to use gold coins to decide left and right. After looking up, they headed in the direction that was closer to the peak. The fastest group of people were the 2 teams from Solitude under the moonlight. The 3 who went around the back of the mountain slowed down and pretended to go up, but the 17 people on their side had already begun to charge up. The higher the mountain, the stronger the wind. This small rule was not ignored by the parallel world. When they rushed to the top, Solitude immediately saw a smear of black. Gu Fei stood at the top of the mountain, his black sorcerer robe fluttering in the wind like a windbreaker. He looked extremely cool. Holding the dark night light sword, he had been drawing circles on the ground, but when he heard the voice, he looked up at Solitude and smiled. It's you. Why are you so late? When the Han family young master mocked Gu Fei for standing at the edge of the mountain like an idiot, he retreated. As an eye. The Han family young master did not mention this and only asked him seriously, Qianli, tell me honestly, how many can you fight alone? 10 should be no problem, said Gu Fei confidently. Limit, said the Han family young master. Limit is such a vague concept. It's hard to say. Gu Fei was troubled. Oh, then don't come down from the mountain. For what? To challenge the limit, said the Han family young master. Chapter 262. Seeing that Gu Fei was still at the top of the mountain, Solitude Moonlight was very pleased, thinking that his plan had succeeded. He was the first to charge up the mountain. At this moment, the players behind him were climbing up the mountain one by one. Solitude Moonlight stared at Gu Fei, hoping to see a change in his expression. If Gu Fei's face showed fear, wouldn't his side also gain confidence? Unfortunately, Gu Fei still had the same smile on his face when Solitude Moonlight first appeared. He raised a finger and counted the number of people for Solitude Moonlight. After counting them one by one, he said, 17 people. Why didn't you make it a round number? Didn't he see the 3 people go around the back of the mountain? While Solitude Moonlight was shocked, the 3 people had already jumped up the mountain. Gu Fei immediately looked back and nodded. 20 people, so it was a round number. Solitude Moonlight didn't know what Gu Fei was trying to do, but with 20 people here, there was no reason to be afraid of a single opponent. He immediately waved his hand, and the 20 people spread out, surrounding Gu Fei. Everyone's hearts were burning. They had been led around by the nose for a long time, and they finally had a chance to vent their anger. 20 people, is this the limit? Gu Fei even sent a message to the Han family young master. Just make do. If you can't handle it, don't shout for help. No one will care about you, the Han family young master replied. Gu Fei gathered his thoughts and focused on the people in front of him. The first thing he said was, is there anyone else? What? Is there anyone else? Solitude Moonlight didn't understand. Is there anyone else coming? Gu Fei said. 20 people, that's a bit difficult. Don't blame me if you're too cruel. Gu Fei reminded everyone. Are you kidding me? Solitude Moonlight didn't know why, but his heart trembled. They clearly had 20 times the number of people. What was there to be afraid of? Attack! Solitude Moonlight waved his hand, wanting to quickly get rid of this uneasiness. Fire will from the heavens. Fire 3,000 layers flames. The 20 mages chose their favorite area of effect spells to attack first. Under such an encirclement, AoE spells were unavoidable, because there was only so much space in the encirclement. If he wanted to avoid the spell, he would have to break out of the encirclement. How could the opponent give Gu Fei such a chance? After blocking the attack for a bit, the spell fell on Gu Fei's body. Back in the battle against Weina's song, when Gu Fei was trapped in a tight encirclement, he was helplessly burned to death like this, not even dragging a single person down with him. However, the present Gu Fei possessed the instant movement skill. Any encirclement was no longer within his line of sight. When the other party ignited the flames, Gu Fei raised his hand and chanted. With a xiao sound, he flashed behind someone. This was a bit like the traditional game of throwing a handkerchief. There were 20 people in a circle, and Gu Fei was the one throwing the handkerchief. Everyone was guessing who he would throw it behind. However, when throwing the handkerchief, there would often be some more sinister and cunning children who would secretly throw the handkerchief away and pretend to be looking for the target. In the end, they would turn around and return to their original position. The person who was thrown the handkerchief would still foolishly say, gently place it behind the child, everyone, don't tell him. Gu Fei didn't have any tricks up his sleeves. He only had one word, quick. When he disappeared from everyone's sight, he had already flashed behind someone. No one had time to react. Gu Fei didn't do much. He just pushed this person and casually gave him a sword. This was truly pushing someone into a pit of fire. Moreover, Gu Fei had chosen someone who looked like they didn't have much HP. Not only did he push him, but he also gave him a sword. He was afraid that the opponent's mage spells weren't strong enough to insta-kill this person. This person turned into a white light and disappeared in the flames of his own people. Seeing that one of their people had already died, the people in the circle felt a chill in their hearts. However, they quickly adjusted their mentality and continued to attack Gu Fei. Solitude under the moon didn't panic. He just silently counted in his heart, teleport once. According to the information they had gathered, Gu Fei could use spells 4 times. Exhausting Gu Fei's mana was the most effective method in solitude under the moon's mind. Normally, sacrificing one's companions in PvP to exhaust a mage was a bit unjust. However, in this mercenary battle, there was no harm. There was no loss if one died. It was just that there would be a little less experience and other rewards. However, compared to the overall victory, this little sacrifice was not a big deal. Gu Fei stretched out his sword and swung it. Just now, an archer in the circle had fired a homing arrow. Now that the archer was chasing after him, Gu Fei stretched out his sword and flicked it. After that, he took a few steps back. The other party obviously thought that Gu Fei was running away. One of the thieves was very anxious. He had probably heard that Gu Fei was extremely fast and was afraid that he wouldn't be able to catch up if he ran away, so he immediately used sprinting to catch up. Good timing. Gu Fei thought to himself. Seeing that the thief was about to catch up to him, Gu Fei suddenly took a step forward instead of retreating. His body slanted to the side and he stretched out his leg. His hand also casually pushed the thief's back. Aya! The thief was tripped and pushed by Gu Fei, causing him to stumble. However, as a thief, he was very agile, so he wouldn't have fallen. However, at this moment, he had already rushed out of the mountain. Suddenly, there was a large slope in front of him. Naturally, the thief couldn't stop himself and rolled down the mountain with a series of "Aya." This cry echoed throughout the entire map. When the Han family young master heard this, he sent a message of concern. "What the hell are you doing now?" "I pushed someone down the mountain," Gu Fei replied calmly. The remaining 18 people were listening attentively to the scream and didn't move for a moment. "Get rid of him. Will he die if he's pushed down the mountain?" The Han family young master was dissatisfied. He said that he was giving Gu Fei a chance to challenge his limits, but in fact, he wanted Gu Fei to kill these 20 people. He wanted to kill them completely. "Oh, I think he's dead," Gu Fei replied with a slight pity. The system had just sent a message. Child Elite Group had gained another point. This guy who had rolled down the mountain directly turned into white light. This bumpy journey had cost him a lot of suffering before he could finish his life. Gu Fei said that he might be a little cruel when he made a move, and what he said was true. Then continue to push him down the mountain. As long as he could kill him, the Han family young master didn't care how he died, because they were going to be busy over here. The team of 10 people who climbed the wall went down the wall and headed towards the bottom of the mountain. Finally, they found the Han family young master and the other 2 people standing at the side. The 10 people were naturally overjoyed, praising their boss for his accurate foresight. "You've been surrounded." One of the brothers might have watched too many Hong Kong movies. At this moment, he was knocking an arrow and shouting at the 3 people as he advanced. "What are you shouting for? Just attack." Another person said in disdain. It was obvious that the 10 people were very relaxed and didn't take the 3 people seriously. Even the encirclement was just talk, but they didn't really surround them. What was there to surround? These 3 people weren't people with outstanding speed. If they wanted to run, they could just chase after them. A warrior, a cleric, and a knight might take some time to deal with them, but it was only a matter of time. The other party only had the warrior, who was a damage dealer, and couldn't wear down their strength at all. The 10 people proudly reported that they had found their targets in the channel and bragged about taking them down immediately. The 10 people each took out their weapons, chanting and releasing arrows as they launched their attacks. The archer's arrow bounced out first. Unscathed in battle took a step forward and didn't dodge. He took the arrow head-on. Behind him, the Han family young master cast regeneration to replenish his HP. "Brother, you also cast a blessing of stamina to increase unscathed in battle's physical defense. Fire trees 1,000 layers of flames. A mage chanted. He was about to set the three of them on fire when an arrow suddenly appeared out of nowhere and hit the mage right in the head. Rise! The mage spat out the last word of his chant. The ground fire was already rising, but he was mercilessly killed by the sniper shot. Yutian Shinming was still the same. He always picked the weakest people to bully. Since the mage was already dead, the fire didn't cause any damage at all. The remaining 9 people were also thrown into a panic by the sudden appearance of the arrows. Suddenly, a shadow flashed by the side of the marsh. A person dashed down with a trail of dust, and the dagger in his hand stabbed at the enemy without hesitation. Unscathed in battle also launched an attack at this time. It was his best skill, charge, followed by whirlwind slash. He plunged into the enemy's formation and spun in circles. The arrows in the distance were still shooting one after another. The Han family young master cast regeneration on the side with ease. Brother Yu rushed into the formation and helped Sword Demon. Unscathed in battle was still spinning, and his own people couldn't get close. Black Index Finger obviously miscalculated. He thought that the opponents had split into 1, 2, or 3 people, but he didn't know that Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming had rushed out of the forest and escaped. After Gu Fei destroyed the eyes on the top of the mountain, he immediately turned around and came back here. Without the eyes on the top of the mountain to monitor them, the map was naturally free for them to run around. If it was said that they could kill time when facing a team of 3 or 10 people, it was a different story when facing 5 people. The equipment and skills of the experts were already above them. Coupled with their skillful cooperation, killing the 10 of them was not a problem at all. Seeing his teammates fall one by one, the team leader in charge of this team gritted his teeth in hatred. The distress signal had already been sent out, but his team had chosen their own direction, so help couldn't come so quickly. Fell into a trap, completely fell into a trap. Old Black. You wanted to take advantage of them splitting up, but now you've been beaten at your own game and digested our team. That was what the team leader thought in his heart before he left. He was full of resentment towards Black Index Finger's mistake again. Done. Unscathed in battle clapped his hands and put his sword back into his pocket. Qianli, how's it going? Han family young master sent a message to Gu Fei, but he didn't get a reply. Obviously, an intense battle had started, and he didn't have the time to talk nonsense with him. If Qianli just happened to kill all the people on the top of the mountain, it would be perfect. Han family young master sighed, but he knew that he couldn't ask for too much. It was already unbelievable for one person to fight 20 people alone, but he still wanted to kill all 20 people in an instant. How was that possible? The author of this article was very strict. Now that there are eyes on the top of the mountain, it's a little inconvenient to retreat, but the other people are probably arriving soon. Han family young master was thinking in his heart. Yutian Shinming, who had shot enough arrows from afar, rushed back to the bottomland and shouted to the others, "There are a few more over there, let's go and finish them." Where? The few of them climbed out of the bottomland and looked forward. There were 4 people who had already run to the foot of the mountain, but they stopped. Yo, it seems to be the main character. This is a big deal. Han family young master said delightedly. At the foot of the mountain were Black Index Finger and his 3 subordinates. They had planned to chase after Soliloquy under the moon to see how awesome Gu Fei, the legendary sorcerer, was. Suddenly, they received a report from their team that they had found 3 people on the other side, and they boasted that they had taken them down very quickly. However, before Black Index Finger could say a few words of encouragement, the other side suddenly cried for help. Although Black Index Finger and his men were halfway up the mountain, they happened to be not facing this direction, so they didn't know what was going on. As they went down the mountain, they hurried to the coordinates reported by the other side. As a result, they saw the points of the other side skyrocketing, and the number of people on their side dropping rapidly. Soon, the 10 people were all gone. Black Index Finger and his 3 subordinates had just reached the foot of the mountain. The people who had been sacrificed outside the battlefield finally sent a detailed report. The other side didn't have 3 people, but 5. They were very powerful, and 10 people couldn't handle them. Black Index Finger and his 3 subordinates immediately stopped. Black Index Finger considered himself an expert, but he didn't think that he was a heaven-defying expert. They had already investigated the backgrounds of the child elite group. Sword Demon, unscathed in battle, Yutian Shinming, and Brother Yu. Elite group, true to its name. There were 5 people on the other side, 4 experts, and one of them was the team leader. They definitely weren't weak. But what about him? 4 people. I'm considered an expert, but these 3 can't compare to me. Black Index Finger thought shamelessly. Confidence couldn't be eaten at a time like this, so Black Index Finger stopped advancing and urged the other teams to hurry up. However, he didn't go in, but the 5 people from the child elite group had already taken the initiative to move out. After the 5 people got out of the bottomland, they strode toward the 4 people. Chapter 263. The depression was not far from the foot of the mountain. Imperial Sky Divine Ming ran into the depression from another direction, and the Black Index Finger saw it with his own eyes. At that time, he was still worried. Don't tell me he ran away again. Should I go and see which direction they went? In the end, he didn't have to worry too much. The opponents didn't run at all. He didn't want to go forward, but the opponents came out of the depression to meet him. Black Index Finger was stunned. He had already calculated the outcome of a 4-on-5 fight. Seeing that the opponents had taken the initiative to attack, he immediately made a decision. Let's go up the mountain first. Compared to the teams that were rushing back from afar, the Moonlight Solitude team was closer. They would meet up with them first and fight if they could win. If they couldn't, they would drag it out. The other teams should arrive soon. The Black Index Finger urged the other 3 to go up the mountain as soon as possible. In fact, there was no need to rush them, because Black Index Finger was the slowest among the 4 of them. If the other 3 spread out and ran to the top of the mountain, they would be much safer. Now that they had to cater to Black Index Finger's clumsy movements, they were much slower. The 3 of them knew how to count. They could clearly see the 10 points that the opponents had just gained. How could they not know how strong they were? At this time, they hated Black Index Finger for running too slowly. They wanted to kick him, but Black Index Finger was still shouting at the 3 of them, "Hurry, hurry, hurry. Stop. Are you trying to run?" Yutian Shinming ran fast and had a long range. The 4 of them were soon within his attack range. He drew his bow and shot. Thus, the 4 of them climbed up the slope with all their might, arrows constantly flying at their butts. Just like that, the 4 of them became living targets for the Imperial Heaven Divine Cry. The 4 of them didn't have a cleric, so they could only endure the arrows. Especially the first guy who was shot by Yutian Shinming. He wasn't killed instantly, but he was shot until he only had a little bit of HP left. He almost fainted from fear. His attack is too high, too high. In his fear, this guy didn't care about his brotherhood and ran away. Black Index Finger saw that he was really getting up and didn't say anything else. He looked at the other 2 with a pitiful expression. At least the 2 of them were still loyal and didn't abandon their Black Index Fingers and become living targets. The 3 of them continued to climb through the hail of bullets. Fortunately, Yutian Shinming's snipe was still on cooldown. Although the damage of his other attacks was higher than that of an average archer, it was not enough to kill him instantly. After all, Yutian Shinming was only one person. He was holding a bow, not a machine gun, and he had to run and shoot at the same time. The target was a live target. Even the Olympic Games did not have such a difficult event. It was understandable that he would miss occasionally. However, even if it were to miss, it would not be too ridiculous. If it were to reach the 3 of them, it would be enough to scare them into a cold sweat. His HP wasn't full, so if he were to be hit by a few arrows, he definitely wouldn't survive. The black index finger was already trying its best. The other two also wanted to try their best, but they had to match the speed of the black index finger, which was very painful. The four of them were climbing happily. Suddenly, they heard several screams coming from the top of the mountain. When they looked up, they saw the three of them standing on the side of the mountain. They opened their arms and swung them a few times, trying to control their balance. However, it was instantly judged that swinging their arms was useless, so they rolled down on their backs. The four of them were shocked. There were arrows chasing them from behind, and there was a rolling log in front of them. Oh no, a rolling person blocking their way. Even the ancient battle of Gaozhan was nothing like this. The person running in front was overestimating himself. When he saw that it was his brother who rolled down, he went forward to stop him. He didn't even consider how much strength he had. How much kinetic energy did the other party turn into when he rolled all the way from the top of the mountain? With his slender arms, was it enough to coordinate the friction force and the rolling person to achieve a balance of the two forces? He did it. The two forces were really balanced. However, physics told us that there were two states of an object under the balance of two forces. One was static, and the other was moving at a uniform speed. Sadly, this guy had entered the second state. He turned into a rolling person. Because he was obstructing the one coming down the mountain, the guy began to move at a uniform speed. However, this state couldn't be maintained for long because the acceleration of gravity had increased. In the blink of an eye, the two of them rolled down the mountain in a chase. Black index finger and the others at the bottom of the mountain wanted to stop them, but when they saw the miserable state of their brother, they didn't dare to move. They pretended to be caught off guard and let the guy who rolled down first brush past them. The three of them looked at each other and secretly felt ashamed. Seeing that another person rolled down, the three of them made up their minds and went forward together. If one of them couldn't stop him, the three of them should be fine, right? However, some of the people who rolled down the mountain had already deviated from the track. There was only one person left in front of the three of them. The three of them thought that this was just right, so they didn't rescue the other two and went straight to this one. It was indeed easy for the three of them to stop one. The guy who had rolled halfway down the mountain was still screaming after being rescued. It was obvious that he was in great pain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have died when he reached the bottom of the mountain. Brother, it's okay. The guy who stopped the guy shook him and called out sincerely. Oh. The guy slowly opened his eyes. Seeing that he had stopped, he was overjoyed and thanked him repeatedly. What are you thanking me for? We're. Before he finished, the sincere big brother turned into a white light and disappeared. Black index finger and the other guy's expressions changed. They had forgotten that there were people chasing after them. Black index finger hurriedly picked up the guy who had rolled down and said, "Hurry, go up the mountain." Up the mountain? The guy exclaimed, "It's very dangerous up there." Dangerous? Black index finger was confused. Isn't there only one person on the mountain? There was indeed only one person on the mountain, but he was the most dangerous one. In the parallel world, there were two steps to chanting a spell. The first step was to shout out the name of the spell. After shouting, magic power would be consumed, and the spell would begin to take shape. The second step was to activate the incantation to make the spell attack. If one only shouted out the name of the spell without the incantation, the spell wouldn't attack after it took shape, and naturally, it wouldn't cause any damage. For example, in the offline safe zones, one could shout out the name of the spell to summon it, but the incantation would be ineffective. Therefore, when facing a mage, one had to dodge as soon as they heard the mage's chant. Therefore, nowadays, the mages wouldn't shout at the top of their lungs. Instead, they whispered to each other and carefully spat out the incantation as if they were whispering sweet nothings. They sounded extremely gentle, but the destructive power of the spell was exactly the same. Gu Fei wasn't so gentle at the moment. Instead, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Thousand whooshu, whoosh 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 whoosh." Before he could finish shouting, everyone began to dodge, instantly killing a mage. Who would still doubt the power of Gu Fei's spell? Of course, the earlier they dodged, the safer they would be. Their eyes were fixed on the direction Gu Fei was pointing at, and they realized that it was the center of the mountain. Therefore, everyone naturally scattered and dodged towards the side of the mountain. This was the effect that Gu Fei wanted. He had originally planned to only shout half of the incantation, so he immediately changed directions and teleported to the side of the mountain. The three mages were caught off guard, and just like that, they were pushed down by Gu Fei, resulting in the scene just now. 2 teleportations and 1 dual flame flash. Solitude under the moon calculated as his heart thumped wildly. If it wasn't for the fact that Gu Fei had a problem with magic power, if he could use it endlessly. 20 people. Perhaps even 30 people would be wiped out by him, right? Moonlight's Solitude could not understand how this person could react so quickly. Any attack would be dodged by him without any hesitation, and no one could block or dodge his counterattack. Up to this point in the battle with Gu Fei, 1 person had been pushed down the mountain, 3 people had been killed with a dual flame flash, and 3 people had been pushed down the mountain. During this time, he had shouted the 1,000 whooshu flames, but afterwards, he found out that it was just a bluff. Of the 20 people at the top of the mountain, only 13 remained. However, Gu Fei only had enough magic power left to use dual flame flash once or teleport once. Solitude under the moon was able to keep his composure and ordered everyone, "Don't panic. His incantation time is very long. There's still time to slowly dodge after he finishes chanting." The Black Hand mercenary group had warned them about Gu Fei's weakness many times, but with his reputation for killing mages in an instant, not many people could face him so calmly in real combat. Dodging as soon as they heard the incantation was already a conditioned reflex reaction. They had long forgotten about being slow or not. At this time, the opponent had indeed recognized Gu Fei's weakness. Solitude under the moon had experienced fighting against Gu Fei, so they had been standing in different positions. Gu Fei had taken advantage of the opportunity to kill 3 people with a dual flame flash, so there was no way he could do it a second time. It seemed that the cruel method of using a lip-syncing spell to lure everyone to the side of the mountain and then push them down had been seen through. One more spell. What will he use? Solitude under the moon stared at Gu Fei. He won't teleport next to me and push me down the mountain, will he? Solitude under the moon glanced behind him. Although he knew that he was still a long way from the side of the mountain, he still felt a chill down his spine. Everyone else's mentality was the same as Solitude under the moon. In a situation where they had the advantage in numbers, they wanted to see what Gu Fei would do first. Gu Fei was still smiling calmly like when Solitude under the moon had come up the mountain. He clearly held the initiative because the situation had always been under his control. Pushing people down the mountain, dual flame flash, 3 in a second, unpredictable teleportation, everything that Gu Fei had done, the opponents had no choice but to be on guard. At this time, no one dared to get too close to the side of the mountain. Everyone stood in different positions and stared at Gu Fei, afraid that he would disappear behind them. If there were 20 people, it would be quite crowded at the top of the mountain. Now that there were 13 people, it should be enough. Gu Fei thought quietly. Suddenly, he took a step forward and took the initiative to attack again. Chapter 264. At the top of the mountain, Gu Fei was facing 12 people by himself. This attack was based on the principle of proximity. Gu Fei raised his sword and stabbed at a warrior not far away. 4th spell. Beneath the Moonlight's monologue had already started calculating. If Gu Fei were to cast his 4th spell, he would not hesitate to order everyone to surround Gu Fei. In the end, Gu Fei did not make a sound, nor did his sword light up. After the warrior was hit by Gu Fei's sword, he looked at the damage and shouted in surprise, "Don't worry, just a casual strike. He was very happy, but Monologue felt very depressed. He wished that Gu Fei could instantly kill this warrior with a dual flame flash. Now that he was worried about Gu Fei's last spell, if they surrounded him, dual flame flash would instantly kill them. The warrior's casual words made Monologue feel depressed, but it made Gu Fei even more furious. The Gu clan's exquisite swordsmanship was called a casual strike by the opponent. Just a random sword strike, why don't you dodge for me to see? Gu Fei's face was full of tears. These players were too unprofessional. They only knew how to say that his attack was abnormal and that he could instantly kill mages. Did none of them notice that no one could dodge his attacks? Even if he wanted to instantly kill a mage, he had to hit them first, right? If he had the ability to dodge, then what was the point of having a high attack? For example, like me, as Gu Fei thought about it, he dodged the warrior's backhand axe. This kind of careless attack was full of flaws in Gu Fei's eyes. If it was a real battle, Gu Fei could really cripple him with a casual strike. Unfortunately, this was a game. Gu Fei had already stabbed him 3 times, but this guy was still very proud of himself, swinging his axe and slashing at Gu Fei. His slashes were quite beautiful. This kid can't bear to use spells anymore. Idiot. Moonlight Solitude cursed inwardly. The opponents were indeed reluctant to use their spells, but because they always had a trump card that they couldn't use, the others didn't dare to surround them. Soliloquy waved his hand, wanting to get the ranged classes to help out, but when he looked around, he was shocked. There was only one archer left. Archers and mages, these 2 ranged classes, were either instantly killed or rolled down the mountain. Gu Fei had already taken care of them in the previous encounter. The fight at the beginning wasn't meaningless. Sweat had already appeared on Solitude Moonlight's forehead. All this while, he had thought that he had been pushing people, insta-killing them, and then pushing people again to take advantage of the opportunity to wear them down. Only now did he realize that there was a purpose to this. The ranged classes were almost completely exhausted, and the melee classes didn't dare to surround him. Could it be that it had become a one-on-one situation? What a joke. There's only 1 spell left. Can't we afford it? Beneath the moonlight cast healing spells to heal the warrior while ordering the others to surround him and attack him together. But he still has 1 more spell. The other melee players hesitated. There's only 1 spell left. What's there to be afraid of? He'll definitely die after we wear him down. Soliloquy roared. He deliberately spoke very loudly so that Gu Fei could hear him. His plan wasn't a conspiracy. It was an open plan that the opponents could see, but they had no choice but to use it. He wanted to give Gu Fei a heads up. He also wanted to know how Gu Fei would react to this. Gu Fei's reaction was no reaction. His normal attacks were basically useless against the priest's healing spells, but he still continued to stab at the cleric. The warrior reacted fiercely. He gripped his axe with both hands and roared, "Don't come over." Damn! He's finally here. Gu Fei was delighted when he saw his opponent's posture. Whirlwind Slash, the warrior's Whirlwind Slash. It's been a long time. Gu Fei felt that it had been a long time since he had used this move, and it had been a long time since he had used this method to block it. With a vertical sword, he took advantage of every opening. There was a crisp sound when the sword and axe clashed. Gu Fei was sent flying by the Whirlwind Slash. The warrior was stunned, but he quickly cheered up. Ha ha ha, you can get down the mountain too. He thought that Gu Fei would definitely roll down the mountain when he was sent flying. Gu Fei, however, looked down on him disapprovingly. His block was a form of borrowing force. The direction of the force was ultimately controlled by Gu Fei. In other words, the direction of the flying was under Gu Fei's control. How could he use this force to fly down the mountain? Even if he used this force to fly down the mountain, Gu Fei would definitely be able to land steadily on the slope. Do you think this is a Grandmaster of Combat's hugging throw? There's a stun in the air. Gu Fei rarely looked down on his opponent from a gaming perspective. The soldier was happy at first, but looking at the direction and momentum of Gu Fei's flight, he reckoned that it was impossible for Gu Fei to fly out of the mountain and roll down the mountain. He felt very regretful that he could not avenge his brothers who had been pushed down the mountain, an eye for an eye. Flying in the air, Gu Fei returned his sword and unsheathed his blade. He completed the equipment exchange at a speed that could be missed in the blink of an eye. Baptism of fire in his hand, he slashed at the player next to him the moment he landed. The player had long since seen Gu Fei flying in his direction. He was still thinking that he might be able to throw Gu Fei off the mountain with a push. He was feeling quite excited. He didn't expect Gu Fei to land so steadily when he flew over, and he didn't expect the attack to arrive before he even landed. The slash was brilliant, and the flames from the baptism of fire burned the player's face red. It's a spell. The others didn't care about their own brother's life or death. They cheered and surrounded Gu Fei excitedly, ready to chop him into meat paste. Wait, that's not a spell. Solitude Moonlight was flustered. Why aren't these guys calmed down at all? If it's a spell, why is he still standing? Solitude Moonlight had experienced this attack when he fought against Gu Fei. It was an enchantment attack. It was very similar to Double Flame Flash, but the damage was completely different. By the time Solitude Moonlight shouted this, it was already too late. The melee players on his side had already surrounded Gu Fei. They had originally been scattered, but now, they all reached Gu Fei's side at almost the same time. Could it be that the place where he landed after being sent flying by the whirlwind slash was also carefully chosen? Only an expression of disbelief remained on Solitude Moonlight's face. His late warning didn't have any effect. Although the players who had already reached Gu Fei's side heard his shout, they were still hot-blooded. Moreover, it was too late to retreat now. They might as well sacrifice 3 people to chop Gu Fei up on the spot. Unfortunately, they still didn't know enough about Gu Fei's skills. Double Flame Flash. Gu Fei had already finished swapping equipment. He held the night streak in front of him. Gu Fei's feet spun, his waist twisted, and his arms and wrists swung in a single direction. First of all, he had to thank the Black Hand mercenary group for their fight with Gu Fei at the city gate. Because the duration of the skill was fixed, Gu Fei had been researching how to kill as many people as possible during the limited duration of the Double Flame Flash. Previously, he had simply increased his agility, increased his attack speed, and then calculated the enemy's position to maximize his attacks. However, that inadvertent turn at the city gate made Gu Fei realize how simple and stupid his thinking had been. His thinking had been solidified by the game's settings. Gu Fei felt that it was both pitiful and shameful. Previously, he had only paid attention to his attack speed. In reality, if he coordinated all the parts of his body that could move, the range of this skill would be greatly increased. At this moment, the range of Gu Fei's Double Flame Flash had reached nearly 450 degrees. This meant that some of the people standing in front of him would be hit by the same Double Flame Flash twice. This was something that no mage could do. White light bloomed around Gu Fei like fireworks. In truth, Solitude Moonlight hadn't expected this. He didn't think that Gu Fei would be able to instantly wipe out an entire circle of people. There were 6 people in this circle. Of the 20 people, only 6 were left. Gu Fei's mana had truly been used up. But the problem was that the remaining 6 people were 3 clerics, 2 knights, and an archer. This combination made Solitude Moonlight want to cry. Even if archers were the bane of mages, could they rely on an archer to turn the tables in this situation? Solitude Moonlight was still thinking when Gu Fei raised his hand. Lightning, descend. A bolt of lightning struck down. Solitude Moonlight didn't even need to think about it. The archer had already been killed by Gu Fei's lightning. After using 4 of his ultimate skills, Gu Fei still had a bit of extra mana left. He could choose between Fireball or Lightning. Lightning was a level 40 class advancement skill. Combined with Gu Fei's overpowered equipment, he could easily insta-kill a low-health class. 3 priests and 2 knights, the 2 classes that were said to be the weakest in the parallel world, were placed right in front of Gu Fei. Gu Fei didn't show any mercy. The challenge that the Han family young master had given him hadn't ended yet. After switching weapons again, Gu Fei brandished Baptism of Flames and charged at Solitude Moonlight. At the same time, he put on the enchanted accessories that he had taken off previously. It could be said that Gu Fei had put in a lot of effort in order to lure the enemy. Chapter 265. Of course, Monologue couldn't withstand Gu Fei's attacks. He could only rely on his 2 cleric companions to heal him from time to time. Learning from their previous battle with Gu Fei, the 2 clerics stood far away from Gu Fei to prevent Gu Fei from interrupting their skills. The 2 knights each cast a power blessing on themselves. At times like this, knights were better than clerics in terms of combat power. Unfortunately, they couldn't pose much of a threat to Gu Fei. Gu Fei was no longer focused on Monologue. From time to time, he would turn around and attack the 2 knights. It seemed like the 3 of them had surrounded Gu Fei, but the 3 of them were the ones who were flustered. It could be said that this was the most useless encirclement in history. Only Monologue knew how he felt. At this moment, he was annoyed and shocked by the black index finger halfway up the mountain. He had already climbed up the mountain for quite some time. He was already 2/3 of the way up. This warrior's movement speed was truly terrifying. Among the pursuers, Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming were getting closer and closer. This wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was that as Monologue climbed up the mountain, his opponent's points kept rising. There were a total of 6 opponents. 5 of them were right behind him, and only 1 wasn't right under his nose. It was needless to say who had earned these points. At first, Monologue was still in a daze. Suddenly, his opponent's points increased by another 6. Monologue's footsteps stopped. He felt more and more like he had escaped from a sea of suffering and jumped into a pit of fire. What kind of realization was this? Wasn't it too valiant? Monologue, how many people do you have up there? Monologue sent a message. His opponent's points had increased by 1. Monologue looked at the number of people on his side. In fact, he already knew how many people had died, but he couldn't believe it. 5. Although Solitude Moonlight was in the middle of a battle, and he was very willing to dodge Gu Fei's attacks, there was no point in dodging. So, he simply replied to the black index finger. How could this be? The black index finger was stunned. Black index finger had no doubt that he could finish off the remaining 5 before he reached the top of the mountain. After that, wouldn't the 3 of them die in vain? Ouch! Just as he was thinking about it, a fellow beside him shouted out again. He suddenly stopped, and the Imperial Sky Divine cry immediately accurately hit the target. Old Black, what should we do? This person was extremely anxious. He knew that there were wolves in front of him and tigers behind him, but he still had to make a choice, right? At this moment, they were neither advancing nor retreating. The arrows behind them were still shooting. The 3 of them were swaying left and right to dodge the arrows halfway up the mountain. At first glance, they looked quite happy. Black index finger gazed into the distance. He could see that some of his own teams were rushing over, but they were definitely not as fast as the guys behind them. Just as he was hesitating, Soliloquy sent another message. Where are you guys, Old Black? Is anyone coming over? Monologue realized that he was really out of his mind. When he was down to 12 people, he still hadn't thought about calling for reinforcements. He was still hoping to exhaust the last quarter of Gu Fei's mana before taking him down. In the end, he ended up like this. Black index finger had also chased them up the mountain. He didn't know about this. I'm halfway up the mountain. Black index finger replied. Ah. Hurry up and come up. He's already out of mana, Monologue yelled. Black Index Finger heard this and immediately urged the two guys beside him. Hurry, 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 continue up the mountain. What's wrong? One of them asked. That magician is already out of mana, Black Index Finger shouted. Go up and finish off the magician. Then, 5 and 3 of us will make a total of 8 people and hold off the attacks of the other 5 until reinforcements arrive. Then, even if all 8 of us die, the others will be trapped on the mountain and won't be able to escape. This mercenary battle will be our victory. Black Index Finger calculated in his heart. Without mana, Gu Fei's efficiency was indeed very low. Unfortunately, the other side had 2 clerics beside him. The 2 knights realized that they couldn't attack Gu Fei at all. After using Blessing of Power, which was useless, they switched to using Blessing of Life, which could recover health. One of the 2 paladins was a level 40 paladin who also had a recovery skill. In the end, they didn't surround him anymore. They spread out and took turns to heal soliloquy. After a while, they realized that the situation wasn't dangerous at all. Without mana, Gu Fei's attacks were really weak. If the Baptism of Fire didn't use any enchantments, it was so weak that it was almost negligible. This enchantment would disappear from time to time, so the other healers weren't very busy. Moreover, the 3 of them took turns. If they knew the time well, they could make time to eat fruits to replenish their mana. There was no end to this. It was just that Monologue had to suffer as a sandbag. Moreover, he was being cut by knives and burned by fire. It was quite miserable. As for Gu Fei, it was useless in this situation. The others gradually relaxed. If it weren't for the fact that Monologue still had a bitter expression, they would have been happy to watch Gu Fei's useless performance. How could Gu Fei not know this situation? Previously, the 3 of them had surrounded him. He had slashed left and right, and the 2 clerics were a bit nervous. They kept casting recovery spells. Gu Fei was hoping to quickly exhaust their mana so he could kill them one by one. Unexpectedly, the other side wasn't that stupid. After being nervous for a while, they immediately made a clear judgment. In the current situation, there was no point in continuing. Gu Fei stopped and put his knife back into his pocket. The others looked at him suspiciously. Gu Fei spread his hands. I can't kill him anyway, so what's the point of fighting? What trick do you have now? Monologue was very nervous. In his heart, Gu Fei was sinister and vicious. Don't you know the situation just now? It was just a waste of time. Gu Fei said as he sent a message to the Han family young master. I can't, the challenge failed. I can't fight anymore. There are only 5 of them left. 3 clerics and a paladin are washing up. There's no end to it. Hold on, we're coming up soon. The Han family young master said. Is that so? Gu Fei walked to the side of the mountain. In his eyes, Monologue and the others were basically air. To be honest, Gu Fei felt that it was quite boring to fight these 2 non-combat professions. Yo, your people are almost here. Gu Fei stood at the side of the mountain. The first people he saw were Black Index Finger and the others. Not far behind them were Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming. Behind them were the Han family young master, unscathed in battle, and Brother Yu. Behind them were the 4 Black Hand mercenary group teams rushing over from different directions. At this time, Gu Fei was casually standing on the side of the mountain. This was really a great temptation. One of the opposing knights was startled for a moment, then immediately tiptoed behind Gu Fei. The other 4 immediately understood his intentions, and in an instant, the top of the mountain became silent. Sword Demon, Yutian, you 2 run faster. Catch them. Gu Fei waved his arms. The 5 of them didn't have the mind to pay attention to the other side. The knight heard Gu Fei shouting and was afraid that he would suddenly turn around. He quickened his steps and finally reached behind Gu Fei. When he was about to reach out, Gu Fei suddenly turned his head. The knight's 2 arms were in front of him. When he saw that Gu Fei had turned around, he didn't care anymore and fiercely pushed towards Gu Fei. But Gu Fei's turning around wasn't a coincidence. He quickly reached out and grabbed one of the knight's arms, pulling him forward. But then again, the knight only wanted to push Gu Fei down. He didn't bring out the kind of courageous and murderous aura that seemed like he was going to perish together with Gu Fei. He just moved his arms forward. Gu Fei didn't need to use this bit of force to drag the knight down. But Gu Fei really didn't want to miss such an opportunity. While his hands were working hard, his legs were also tripping. There weren't many wrestling techniques in Kung Fu, but Gu Fei had used all that he could think of. It was no exaggeration to say that Gu Fei's fall was very sloppy. It wasn't elegant at all. It even looked a bit like a hoodlum. But no matter what, the knight was finally taken down by him. Yes, he was taken down. Taken was the most appropriate description. Even Gu Fei himself was too embarrassed to agree. What was even more tragic was that their scuffle was seen by the people who were chasing up the mountain. They were all dumbfounded and guessed what kind of fierce battle was going on at the top of the mountain. Even such a shameless fight had happened. But the other 4 people on the mountain received great inspiration from this fight. Solitude under the moonlight had an idea, and he quickly shouted at the 3 people, "He can't do any damage now. Grab him and throw him down." Gu Fei was stunned when he heard this. Indeed, there was such a shameless fighting style in this MMORPG. It often appeared on the side with the advantage in numbers. They would endure the opponent's attacks and then capture the opponent at close range. When Gu Fei fought with the Unchung Mutsu's people outside the revival point, the opponent had hesitated on whether or not to use this fighting style. After all, this fighting style was seen by the players as very unskillful and shameless fighting style. Whoever really used it would be regarded as trash. The more experts in the later stages of the game, the stronger this thought was. But as the saying went, even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered. Solitude under the moonlight and the others had been bullied by Gu Fei to this extent. Who cared if they were graceful or skillful? They aggressively rushed up to capture Gu Fei alive. Frankly speaking, Gu Fei was really afraid of this move. If he slashed at them, they wouldn't dodge, and the 4 of them would just squeeze them in the middle. Gu Fei didn't have any strength. No matter how skillful he was, it would be difficult for him to use it in this situation. He had to dodge. Thus, on the top of the mountain, Gu Fei had a bitter expression as he fled from the 4 people who had turned into pushing the mountain. Fortunately, I have the advantage of speed. Gu Fei wiped his sweat. If drifting didn't have any strength at this time, he would definitely get lost. Gu Fei sighed in his heart. Chapter 266. Black Index Finger had already stopped once in the mountains. By the time he reached the top of the mountain, he froze once again. There wasn't much space on the top of the mountain. Gu Fei and his 4 team members chased each other and had a great time. The atmosphere was so harmonious that Black Index Finger thought he had transmigrated. While Solitude and the others were shouting, "Over there," and block him," Gu Fei was the first to spot him. The joy on his face was definitely not fake. Gu Fei pounced towards Black Index Finger. "Let's duel," Gu Fei shouted. He had had enough of this game of eagle and chick. Before Black Index Finger could react, Gu Fei, who was charging at him, had already raised his hand and stabbed him. Black Index Finger jumped in fright. He thought that he was going to be instantly killed by Dual Flame Flash. But when he saw his health drop, he calmed down. Enchantments and Dual Flame Flash weren't things that ordinary people could differentiate. Solitude finally saw Black Index Finger. It turned out that Gu Fei was standing next to him. He looked at the 4 of them seriously and said, "Stop messing around and fight properly." Black Index Finger took the lead and slashed at Gu Fei. At the same time, he called out to the 2 team members who had come with him, "Hurry up and finish him off." One of them was an archer and the other was a thief. One quickly pulled away, while the other circled around to Gu Fei's side to attack Gu Fei together with black index finger. With 3 priests and a paladin present, Gu Fei's efforts were useless. However, the other side didn't use such shameless methods to bother him, which made him feel relieved. Calculating that Sword Demon and Yutian Shenming were probably about to arrive, he became spirited and tried to deal with his opponent. Originally, Black Index Finger had thought that it would be a piece of cake to deal with a mage who had no mana. He hadn't even bothered to use his strongest skill, Whirlwind Slash. In the end, however, he discovered that Gu Fei's skills were even more ridiculous than the rumors said. No matter how hard he tried, his sword couldn't hit him. But what about his opponent's sword? He didn't know how many times he had scratched himself. The thief next to him was even more embarrassed. Gu Fei circled around the black index finger, while the thief chased after him, waiting for Gu Fei to slow down before stabbing him. However, Gu Fei spun faster and faster, so the thief turned in the opposite direction to block him. In the end, Gu Fei also turned. The thief had been at the top of the mountain for a while now, but he hadn't done anything at all. He just foolishly circled around the black index finger until he and the black index finger were about to throw up. As for the archer, he couldn't even aim his tracking arrow at Gu Fei, who was constantly moving. The moment he released the bowstring, the arrow hit the black index finger. The archer was so scared that he didn't dare to shoot a second arrow. Solitude under the moonlight led the others to take turns replying to the black index finger. In the end, the black index finger looked at them angrily. One person replying is enough. Everyone else, surround this kid. As the boss, everyone had integrity. The black index finger wasn't in the mood to be a punching bag like Solitude under the moonlight. Solitude wanted to say that they wouldn't be able to surround him with so few people, but in the end, he didn't say it. Many people felt that it was an exaggeration to say how strong Gu Fei was. That day, after Solitude under the moonlight failed the two-way quest, he would always be laughed at by his teammates when he talked about how abnormal Gu Fei was. To be honest, when the 20 people were beaten up by Gu Fei, Solitude under the moonlight felt a sense of revenge. In response to the leader's call, 3 priests and 1 knight contributed their strength to surround Gu Fei. But just as Solitude under the moonlight thought, with Gu Fei's movement speed, the priests didn't have a chance to surround him. The top of the mountain was filled with Gu Fei's figures. In the end, the black index finger could only chase after him like the thief. There was a mess of shouts from the top of the mountain. This way, block him, block him. It was the same as when the black index finger first came up the mountain. So I really did transmigrate. The black index finger thought absent-mindedly. The sound of arrows flying through the air disrupted the situation on the mountain. Yutian Shenming and the sword demon had finally arrived. Gu Fei wiped the sweat off his forehead. They're finally here. Imperial Sky Divine Ming clicked his tongue in wonder. Even you have times when you can't hold on? I can't. Gu Fei sighed. There are too many priests. It's better if there aren't any. These words made Solitude under the moonlight very sad. He had been worried that they only had 3 priests and 2 knights left. How good would it be if they were all combat professions? The enemy sorcerer thought the same. From what he said, if they really had that kind of lineup, he would have already killed them all. The black index finger's face was ashen. He had personally experienced how difficult it was to deal with Gu Fei. He no longer doubted that Gu Fei alone could stall for time. Now that the other 2 had arrived, would the other 3 be far behind? Could they really hold on until reinforcements arrived? More importantly, the black index finger didn't even have the ability to escape. There were 7 people on the mountain. Apart from an archer and a thief, the others were the slowest type. Go! Imperial Sky God Ming did not say much, and shouted as he charged forward, opening his hand and shooting an arrow at the archer. Sword Ghost also dashed out with swift step, heading straight for the thief. The archer was saved by the black index finger when he rolled down the mountain. He didn't have full HP to begin with. After being sniped by Yutian Shinming at close range, there was no doubt that he would die. Although there were many priests, they didn't have a chance to heal. The black index finger roared and charged towards Yutian Shinming. Yutian Shinming was experienced. As soon as he saw the black index finger's butt, he screamed and dodged to the side. The black index finger charged to his side and stretched out his hand to use Whirlwind Slash. This was a combo skill that all warriors had to know how to use. Yutian Shinming was forced into a difficult situation. He almost rolled and crawled away from the black index finger, barely dodging the Whirlwind Slash. The black index finger immediately cancelled the skill. Otherwise, it would be a waste of rage. Gu Fei saw this as an opportunity. He quickly closed in and slashed at the black index finger's head. He then pushed with his hand, wanting to catch the black index finger off guard and roll down the mountain. This time, he was too careless. A warrior's strength was overwhelming compared to a mage's. In front of a warrior, the skills that Gu Fei had taught a knight were all useless. Gu Fei's push was very solid, but the black index finger was as still as a mountain. It reflexively reached out and grabbed Gu Fei. With a swing of its arm, it threw Gu Fei away. Beautiful. Solitude Under the Moon was excited. As expected of the boss. He used a trick to deal with the most difficult person to deal with. In fact, the black index finger was also at a loss. Everything that happened just now was a reflex. This kind of movement was the fastest, so Gu Fei didn't have time to react. In the game, adding points to agility was very obvious in terms of movement speed, but it wasn't that exaggerated in terms of attack speed. If a warrior's attack was as slow as a movie, then an agile thief's attack was 8 times faster. No matter how strong a warrior was, he wouldn't be a match for them. Sigh, I was too careless. In the air, Gu Fei reflected on himself and sighed at the huge difference in strength. He then adjusted his posture and maintained his balance. When the black index finger realized that it had done something big, it turned around to see how Gu Fei rolled down. In the end, it saw him land firmly on the mountain. Sword Demon, Yutian, you guys hold on for a while. Gu Fei shouted towards the top of the mountain. He didn't go up anymore. He took an apple and started munching on it. Of course, Solitude Under the Moon also heard Gu Fei's voice. His expression changed. Was he fine even after being thrown down? He rushed to the side of the mountain and looked down. He saw Gu Fei leisurely eating an apple. His eyes met the black index fingers in shock. I can't let him recover his mana. Solitude Under the Moon was about to cry. How could the black index finger not know that this was very important? At this moment, he only hated himself for using so much force and throwing Gu Fei so far away. It was too late to rush over to stop him from eating the apple. Solitude Under the Moon made his last effort. He sent a holy light orb at Gu Fei and floated to Gu Fei's side. Gu Fei didn't dodge. He bought more time to recover. After being hit by the holy light orb, the effect of the apple was interrupted. However, Gu Fei also recovered a quarter of his mana. He chuckled and shouted, I'm coming. He pulled out the dark streak sword and rushed back up the mountain. It's over. Solitude Under the Moon was a very meticulous person. He carefully studied Gu Fei's playstyle, trying to find some unknown flaws. He hadn't found the flaws, but he knew a lot about Gu Fei's habits. When Gu Fei didn't have mana, he would use a saber. When he had mana, he would switch to this long sword that no one had been able to identify. In fact, at this time, the top of the mountain was already in a mess by Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming. As for the thief, Sword Demon stabbed and Yutian Shinming shot. The two of them worked together and didn't give the priest a chance to do anything. It was even easier for them to bully the two priests and the knight. On the other side, Black Index Finger and Solitude Under the Moon were still sighing at Gu Fei's resurrection. Was there any suspense in the subsequent situation? Black Index Finger, Solitude Under the Moon, the two priests, and the knight were all slow. It was impossible for them to escape from Gu Fei's trio. The priest's recovery spell was no longer useful. The combined attacks of these three were enough to kill any class in an instant. Black Index Finger was this heroic. Sword Demon's Backstab, Yutian Shinming's Snipe, and Gu Fei's Dual Flame Flash. Under such unprecedented treatment, if Black Index Finger didn't die, he would be letting the audience down. The remaining four had nothing else to say. After being beaten up by the three of them, they were all sacrificed. The three cleaned up the mountaintop and went to the edge of the mountain to look. The Han family young master and the other two were only a few steps away. The other four teams were also clearly galloping on the map. Chapter 267. The top of the mountain had already been cleared. Han family young master and the other two quickly arrived at the top. Comrades, you've worked hard. Han family young master smiled at the three of them. Pfft. No one paid attention to him. Gu Fei looked at him and really wanted to push him down. They were the ones who had been fighting hard, but this guy was acting like a boss the moment he came up. Look at him standing at the side of the mountain, his priest robe fluttering in the wind. He had the look of a great man. Just as he was thinking about it, the Han clan young master raised his arm and pointed at a group of people. Qianli, I'll leave that group of people to you. Huh? Gu Fei looked up, took out an apple and started munching on it. Yutian, you go and harass that team. Han family young master pointed at another team. Yutian Shinming's eyes were firm. He pulled his bow over his shoulder. Let's go. After saying that, he went down the mountain. Sword Demon, you go and harass that team. Han family young master pointed at the third team. Sword Demon is a bit troublesome, right? Brother, you said. Sword Demon wasn't an archer after all. Even though he had the advantage in speed, he still had to get close to attack. The risk was much higher than Yutian Shinming. No problem. Sword Demon calmly followed Yutian Shinming down the mountain. It's none of my business again. Unscathed in battle was quite depressed. A warrior's fighting style was to fight to the death with high defense and high HP, circling around wasn't his forte. Fighting with fewer people, he wouldn't be able to hold out unless his equipment level was much higher. Black Hand's people were all level 39-40. Even if unscathed in battle's equipment was better, he wouldn't be that strong. It's none of your business. Stay here. After saying that, the Han family young master bent down and sat cross-legged on the side of the mountain. He took out 2 bottles of wine from his pocket. Do you want it? The two of them shook their heads. The young master of the Han family placed 1 bottle beside him and held the other. As he muttered, "It's not cold enough," he opened the bottle with a bang and gulped down a mouthful. Then, he looked down the mountain with a satisfied expression, looking very satisfied. There were 4 teams in total. They harassed 3 teams. What about the last one? Brother Yu was worried again. 4th team. That's also Qianli's. Han family young master said. You didn't tell him. Brother Yu muttered. No need. Those people will find them by themselves. Han family young master said confidently. Brother Yu looked at the situation at the foot of the mountain and immediately reacted. The 3 small dots were already heading towards the opposing team. Even if you couldn't see who was who, you could tell them apart from their fighting style. The one who didn't get close to his opponents and kept his distance as if he was taking a stroll was obviously Yutian Shinming. The arrows couldn't be seen from the top of the mountain. They could only see the opposing team of 10 moving east and west. They were being led by the nose by Yutian Shinming. The one who suddenly disappeared while walking and reappeared was already in front of the opposing team. Then, he immediately turned around and ran. It looked like he was in danger and was obviously Sword Demon. The 2 teams were originally advancing in an orderly manner. However, when they came into contact with the two of them, they started to become restless. However, they were only restless. After Gu Fei suddenly disappeared, the entire third team went berserk. The three people at the top of the mountain could see the flames in their team. Then, there was a circle of white light. Then, an empty space appeared in the middle of the team. Gu Fei slaughtered left and right, showing no mercy. The range of his dual flame flash had been honed to such a large extent that it was akin to a warrior's whirlwind slash. In just a few moments, the 10-man squad had been completely annihilated. Only one person managed to escape, but before he could even take a few steps, there was a sudden clap of thunder. A bolt of lightning exploded on top of that person's head, instantly turning him into a white light. The three people at the top of the mountain were dumbfounded. Han family young master, who was holding a wine bottle, sighed. I didn't expect to see this guy from this angle. I feel that he's even more abnormal. Gu Fei, who had taken care of a team of people, stood alone in the wilderness. He didn't seem to be moving at all. The three people at the top of the mountain laughed. Idiot, are you eating apples again? As for the fourth team that hadn't been assigned to follow Gu Fei's orders, they had already turned around and headed in that direction while they were fighting. This was exactly what Han family young master had planned. If they encountered Gu Fei's men, they would definitely call for help immediately. Thus, they wouldn't need to arrange for the fourth team to rush over. Who would have thought that Gu Fei was so strong that he could wipe out people so quickly? When that team sent out a distress signal, the fourth team's reinforcements had only reached halfway when they found out that the other team had been wiped out. Anyone with normal brain power would naturally think that the 10 of them would just be throwing their lives away. They immediately stopped in their tracks. Gu Fei was clearly standing alone in the wilderness. However, the 10 people who didn't seem to be far from him were even more hesitant. Have you finished eating the apples? Han family young master asked in a private chat. Despise. I'm eating bananas. Gu Fei said. I've finished 267,324. There's another team over there. Han family young master said. Got it. Gu Fei didn't stay for long in the wilderness. He immediately set off towards that team. Not having enough mana actually had its own benefits. It would take less time to recover from 0 to full, wouldn't it? The fourth team also moved after hesitating for a while. However, they didn't move towards Gu Fei. Instead, they moved towards the other two teams. The other two teams had obviously received the same instruction. They began to ignore the harassment of Yutian Shinming and Sword Demon. The three teams wanted to combine. Unfortunately, their movements were completely under the bird's-eye view of Han family young master. The speed of the three teams combined couldn't keep up with Gu Fei's pursuit. In the blink of an eye, Gu Fei caught up with a team. What followed was a repeat of the previous scene. A flash, a riot, a circle to the left, a circle to the right, and then a circle to the side. Then, he chased around. One person fled, and with a bang, he was killed by lightning. A whole 10 people were wiped out just like that. The Black Hand mercenary group had a total of 87 people. They were ambushed by Gu Fei at the top of the mountain. Drifting and the other two died heroically. Student Xiaoying, who was exploring in the woods, was ambushed by Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming and died. Then, Gu Fei ambushed the small mountain again and killed 3 people. Then, the 10-people team encountered Han family young master and the other 4 people in the depression. They were wiped out. The 20-people team under the moonlight at the top of the mountain encountered Gu Fei and were wiped out. The black index finger led the 4 people in a situation where there were wolves in front and tigers behind. They were helpless and jumped into the fire pit, which was equivalent to self-immolation. After that, the child elite group had complete control of the situation. The Han family young master and the other 2 stayed at the highest point while the other 3 went down the mountain to harass them. Gu Fei personally killed 2 teams of 20 people. Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming killed 5 people in the process of harassment. At this point, the Black Hand mercenary group had sacrificed 66 people, leaving only 21 people. Among these 21 people, 6 people had gone out to various parts of the forest to wait for the rabbits. They didn't expect that the rabbits would have bitten most of the hunters. They received the call to gather and came out of the forest to run to the gathering point. However, along the way, they saw the other party's points skyrocket while their sides' numbers dwindle. Soon, other than the 6 of them, there were only 15 people left. These 15 people were put together by 2 teams. At this time, they looked at each other in fear. The mercenary group channel was also silent at this time. Before the battle, everyone was still thinking about how to find this group of rats who were hiding everywhere and how to surround and intercept them when they escaped. Who would have thought that they would fall into such a situation? If this situation continued, the other party would not only win, but they would also win completely. Black Index Finger, who was already out of the battlefield, gritted his teeth. Everyone disperse, let them find them. Drag it until the end of the competition, don't let them get perfect. According to the rules of the match, the requirement to obtain perfect was to defeat all of the opponents without losing a single person in the match. If the match dragged on until the end of the match, the system would determine the winner based on points. Obviously, it was impossible to obtain perfect. Not only would the winning party get more experience and money, but what made the losing party suffer was that the system would broadcast this as an honor in the system channel. Mercenary groups could be said to be business groups that relied on their own strength to seek profits. Losing to the 6 people of the child elite group was already embarrassing enough. Now that they got perfect, would the Black Hand mercenary group still have the face to use the name of the #1 mercenary group in Cloud City to attract business? The people who were still on the map immediately scattered and ran all over the map. Thinking that the other party only had 6 people and they had 21 people, if they scattered to 21 corners, the other party would find them one by one. It would take some time, so they would let them have a taste of their disgusting kiting tactics. The Black Hand mercenary group had now fallen to the point where they could not get perfect to experience the joy of victory. Unfortunately, there was the map killer, Han family young master, sitting at the highest point of the map. With a sip of wine and a set of coordinates, the 3 people at the foot of the mountain used the most concise and effective route to pursue their opponents. Even Zhang Wushang had a chance to show off at this moment. He ran down the mountain and asked the young master of the Han clan to point out a slow target for him. The goal of the Black Hand mercenary group in the beginning was to try their best not to split up and try their best to form a group and a unit. But at the end of the competition, they actually split up. Each person was a unit. This couldn't be said to be a great irony. Everyone at the foot of the mountain ran around like headless chickens, but the people chasing after them had the effective command of Han family young master. They first killed those who tried to hide in the forest, then went to chase after those who ran around. With a clear command and fierce speed, how could the chase not be successful? The points of the child elite group rose all the way and finally reached 86, just 1 point away from the perfect score. There's still one that hasn't appeared yet. According to the analysis of the situation where they have people in each forest, this person should be in the forest on the 145,421 side. Han family young master said. Gu Fei, who had rushed and killed for the whole night, felt that something was missing. He opened his friends list and sent a message to Shi Xiaotian, hey, there's still one left. It can't be you, right? Hee, you guys are really strong. Where are you? Come out yourself, don't waste time. Okay, come over, I'll fight you one-on-one. Shi Xiaotian said. There's a conspiracy. Gu Fei said. Are you scared? Where? 398,137. Shi Xiaotian said. Hee, young master also has times where he makes a mistake. This is completely opposite the direction you said. Gu Fei said as he headed in that direction. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.